Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jasmeen Kaur. Jasmeen Kaur, an Indian girl, was born on September 14, 1999. She is the eldest daughter of Rashal Cor. Jasmeen later had two younger twin brothers named German and Suku. When Jasmeen was 6 years old, her father Rashal Cor passed away. The family had to face many difficulties to overcome this pain. In 2017, Jasmeen was 18 years old and decided to start a new journey. She came to Australia with her relatives to seek new opportunities. Jasmeen's uncle, who lived in Adelaide with his wife and daughter, moved in with them. Because of her love of learning and desire to help others, Jasmeen enrolled at the University of South Australia. After completing her exams, she enrolled in a nursing program. Apart from studying, Jasmeen also takes on the responsibility of cooking for her family. She cooks very well. Jasmeen has proven herself to be a responsible and diligent woman. Jasmeen grew up in a good educational environment. She always kept in touch with her family, especially her mother and close relatives, sharing details of her daily life. To gain practical experience, Jasmeen took a job at a nursing home in the suburbs of Adelaide before completing her medical studies. At the same time, a young man named Tarikjot Singh, born in 1999 in a village in the state of Punjab, India, Tarikjot had a younger brother named Mohan Singh. Tarikjot's father often resolved conflicts in the family in a very brutal way. So the atmosphere in Tarikjot's house was often very tense and made both brothers feel scared. Tarikjot is known for his kindness and success, always willing to help people around him. At school, he was an excellent student. In 2016, when Tarikjot finished his studies, his grandparents tried to save a small amount of money to help him move to Australia. Finally, Tarikjot moved to the beautiful city of Adelaide. Tarikjot passed the English test, a necessary requirement for admission to the University of South Australia. At that time, he was faced with many choices about his direction and field of study. In the end, he decided to pursue information technology and aimed to get a bachelor's degree. In addition to studying, Tarikjot also had to work to support himself. Tarikjot tried many different jobs, mainly related to caring for the elderly. His colleagues loved and respected him, and employers appreciated his honesty and kindness. Over time, Tarikjot achieved much success. Eventually, he saved up enough money to buy his own apartment on the outskirts of the city. There, Tarikjot befriended a young man named Edwin. In 2018, Jasmeen and Tarikjot met for the first time. Tarikjot and Jasmeen were colleagues at their part-time job. Their relationship quickly developed into love. Tarikjot he identified Jasmeen as the person he wanted to build a family life with. However, as time passed, Tarikjot gradually became jealous. He began to suspect Jasmeen. He asked Jasmeen to report her activities in detail, controlled her every move, and became jealous when she met friends after work. Tarikjot became too controlling in his relationship with Jasmeen. Tarikjot kept calling and making baseless accusations. Jasmeen felt that she could not bear this kind of life, so Jasmeen confided in her mother about these problems. The mother knew and did not approve of their relationship. Tarikjot remained unchanged and believed that his thinking was correct. Tarikjot bought a ring to propose to Jasmeen in October 2020, although he felt that Tarikjot was jealous and controlling. Jasmeen still accepted his proposal. Jasmeen began to feel insecure when Tarikjot unexpectedly appeared at her workplace. Although Jasmeen was very happy to have just experienced the feeling of being proposed to, Jasmeen began to doubt Tarikjot's actions. Realizing that the relationship was negatively affecting her mental and emotional health, Jasmeen decided to end the relationship. On January 4, 2021, Jasmeen informed Tarikjot that they had to break up. However, Tariq Jat threatened her that if she left him, he would end his life. The next day, Jasmeen saw Tariq Jat watching her from the window during break time, which made her increasingly worried about her safety. Jasmeen spoke to Tariq Jat and he again begged her to stay, but she was determined to break up. At this point, Tariq Jat began threatening to harm himself and insisted that Jasmeen would be responsible for everything that happened to him. That same night, Jasmeen learned that he had taken a large amount of sleeping pills. Jasmeen immediately contacted a neighbor of Tariq Jat's in the apartment building, who took Tariq Jat to the hospital. At the hospital, Tariq Jat wrote a letter claiming that he had committed suicide because Jasmeen had decided to break up with him, as her family forbade their relationship. The next morning, January 6, 2021, a psychiatrist examined Tariq Jat but found no signs of mental illness. After being discharged from the hospital, Tariq Jat went to Jasmeen's house. Tariq Jat said that he needed to talk to Jasmeen about an important matter. And Tariq Jat tried to convince Tariq Jat to come back to him. However, this attempt failed again when Jasmeen refused. In desperation, Tariq Jat threatened to make public a private video of them to Jasmeen's family. Faced with Jasmeen's indifference, Tariq Jat eventually sent the video to her mother. Shocked, Jasmeen's mother Rashal Cor contacted her daughter. Harpreet was furious when she received the video. Tariq Jat then went to Jasmeen's workplace the next day. Tariq Jat stood by his car and patiently waited for Jasmeen to leave work. Although Jasmeen ignored him and left, Tariq Jat followed her in his car. But suddenly stopped, letting Jasmeen go home. However, that night, Jasmeen could not sleep well. The pressure from Tariq Jat increased and he kept threatening to share her private video with more people if she did not return to him immediately. January 28, 2021, Jasmeen could not bear it anymore. She officially reported Tariq Jat's harassment to the police. The police recorded every detail of their relationship. Due to the seriousness of the case, the police conducted an investigation and met Tariq Jat on February 9 to find out the situation. A few days later, Tariq Jat attempted suicide again but was fortunately discovered by a neighbor in time. In the hospital, he explained that he could not face the breakup and asked to be discharged. His request was accepted and he was discharged. However, after being discharged, Tariq Jat began taking medication prescribed by a doctor to treat depression, anxiety, and agitation. But at the same time, thoughts of harming Jasmeen became stronger in his mind. On March 4, 2021, Tariq Jat collected information about the locations of most of the surveillance cameras in Adelaide. The next day, Tariq Jat used another phone and left it at home to create an alibi. To avoid detection, Tariq Jat borrowed a neighbor's blue Jeep. On the same day, Tariq Jat went to a hardware store to buy necessary items, including gloves, cable ties, and a shovel. However, Tariq Jat did not know that his every move was monitored and recorded by the store's surveillance camera. Tariq Jat then drove to Jasmeen's workplace and waited for her to finish work at around 10 p.m. When she stepped out onto a deserted street, Tariq Jat suddenly attacked, grabbed Jasmeen's arm and dragged her into the car. Tariq Jat covered Jasmeen's mouth and eyes, tied her hands and feet and drove to a deserted location. He then put her in the boot of the car and continued driving to another city, nearly 400 kilometers away from Adelaide. Along the entire route, from 10:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m., 5 city surveillance cameras recorded him using the car. When he reached a deserted location, Tariq Jat got out of the car and began digging a shallow grave near the road. Then Tariq Jat opened the trunk of the car and tried to stab Jasmeen in the throat with a knife, causing minor injuries. Next, Tariq Jat pushed Jasmeen into the grave and began burying her alive. All of this happened in the early hours of March 6. After burying Jasmeen, Tariq Jat got back into the car and drove away. Along the way, he discarded Jasmeen's belongings along with the remaining rope, tape, and other items. He also discarded his gloves and hood at a location known as the Death Rock. That same day, Jasmeen's family became worried when she did not return home. When she failed to show up for work, with no news of Jasmeen, her relatives contacted the police and filed the missing person report. During the investigation into Jasmeen's disappearance, police reviewed surveillance footage from Jasmeen's workplace and discovered surveillance video from the night before showing a man near the building who had been driving toward another city for most of the morning. In an effort to identify the suspect, police issued a public appeal for anyone with information about a man in his 20s who had been in contact with Jasmeen or nearby in the days before she went missing. On March 7th, police met with Tariq Jat to question him about previous police reports of stalking. Tariq Jat initially denied any involvement in Jasmeen's disappearance. However, he later told police that he and Jasmeen had argued and she had attempted suicide. Tariq Jat claimed that Jasmeen died after she passed out and he buried her in a remote location. Tariq Jat was later arrested and led police to the place where he had buried Jasmeen. Jasmeen's body was found under 30 centimeters of sand. Jasmeen's hands were tied behind her back, her legs were tied with cable ties, and her eyes and mouth were covered. The cut on Jasmeen's throat was only a superficial wound. An autopsy was performed. During interrogation, inconsistencies in Tariq Jat's testimony led to his arrest. The autopsy revealed that Jasmeen was alive when she was buried and that the cause of death was lack of air. These findings shed light on the horrific nature of the case. On March 8, 2021, Tariq Jat was charged with murder and remanded in pretrial detention. Tariq Jat's first appearance in the Supreme Court was scheduled for March 2022. However, Tariq Jat fell ill. Instead, Tariq Jat's lawyer appeared and pleaded not guilty. The trial was adjourned until February 6, 2023. On February 6, 2023, Tariq Jat publicly admitted in the Adelaide Supreme Court that he had kidnapped Jasmeen with the intention of killing her. 5 months later, on July 5, 2023, in the Supreme Court of South Australia, the judge sentenced Tariq Jat to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 22 years and 10 months. Tariq Jat could be eligible for parole after this period. However, if released, the defendant would have to leave the country. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Rowan Ford. Rowan Ford was born on April 11, 1998, in San Diego, California. Her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother, Colleen, moved with her to a small town called Stella in Missouri. Later, her mom met a man named David, and they got married. Colleen had several children from a previous marriage, and soon after their wedding, she and David had a daughter together. Altogether, Rowan had 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and they shared a very close bond. She spent a lot of time outdoors, riding her bike around town, enjoying swimming, and indulging in her passion for drawing. She also liked going to Sunday school at the local church, where she always volunteered to help other kids who had some issues with their tasks. In November 2007, when Rowan was 9 years old, she was in the 4th grade at the local elementary school. Her mom worked the night shift at a store, while her stepdad spent most of the day on the farm, which made Rowan often fend for herself, making her very independent. On November 2nd, she stayed home alone as usual. Her mom went to work, and her stepdad hadn't returned from the farm yet. The next morning, around 9 a.m., Colleen came home from her night shift and checked Rowan's room, but her daughter wasn't there. She asked her husband where her daughter was, and he said she had asked him if she could have a sleepover at a friend's house, and he had let her go. He didn't even ask the friend's name because their town was very small, and he wasn't worried about anything happening to her. But Colleen started to worry and decided to check with all of Rowan's friends. Since there were only a few streets in their town, it didn't take long, but none of them had seen her, and she hadn't stayed over at any of their houses, which made her mother even more concerned. Colleen searched the whole town but couldn't find her daughter. She went back home and told her husband that Rowan was nowhere to be found. She asked him to call the police and report her missing, but he reassured her that everything was fine and that she would come home soon. After waiting for several more hours with no sign of Rowan, Colleen took matters into her own hands and dialed 911 herself. The local sheriff immediately organized a search operation. He went to their house to speak with David, and as he was the last person to see Rowan before she disappeared, David said that on that evening, while he was working on the farm with his colleague Christopher, their mutual friend Nathan came by. They all decided to go to David's place to have some drinks and play pool. They stopped by the store, bought some alcohol, and went to David's house, where they spent several hours. Later in the night, Christopher asked Nathan to drive him home to the neighboring town, where his trailer was. They persuaded David to join them to continue the fun. Before leaving the house, he checked on Rowan in her room, seeing that she was asleep. David left with his friends, and they stopped by the store again to grab more alcohol and headed to Christopher's trailer, where they continued drinking for about an hour. After that, David decided to head home and asked Nathan to give him a ride. Nathan agreed but chose to take back roads instead of the main highway. By that time Nathan was quite drunk and didn't want to risk encountering the police. Nathan dropped David off and drove home. David went straight to bed. Soon after, he was awakened by Rowan, who asked if she could sleep over at a friend's house. Without much thought, he agreed and fell back asleep. Police approached this story with some skepticism. What puzzled them most was the fact that a 9-year-old girl decided to go to her friend's house in the middle of the night, and her stepfather let her go without even asking which friend she was talking about. The sheriff considered that David might be hiding something or directly involved in Rowan's disappearance, but he had no evidence to support this theory. Police searched the town and its surroundings until late at night. Local residents immediately joined the search, as they all knew Rowan's family and wanted to help. The population of Stella was only about 150 people, so news of her disappearance spread throughout the county. People were used to being able to let their children play outside without a worry, as nothing ever happened in such a quiet place. But now that Rowan vanished without a trace, and the police were unable to find her for a whole day, the residents of Stella were in a state of panic. The search for Rowan yielded no results on the first day. However, the investigation progressed on November 4th when the police spoke with Christopher in a neighboring town. He corroborated David's account, but revealed that David had not contacted him to inform him of Rowan's disappearance. Christopher stated he had not spoken with Rowan or her friends since that evening. Despite an expanded search with more volunteers, the police failed to find Rowan or any clues about her disappearance. The following day, the FBI joined the investigation while the local police continued searching the town and surrounding areas. As a result of growing skepticism towards David's account, detectives started focusing on a potential abduction. They spoke with all of Rowan's friends and verified that none of them had seen her on the night she went missing. As investigators questioned David, his account raised even more suspicions. David's details were inconsistent and contradictory. He altered the timeline of his whereabouts that night on multiple occasions. Additionally, David speculates that it is possible that Rowan left without his permission, which makes his story even more suspicious. During their investigation, FBI agents found out that David had borrowed his mother's car on the night of Rowan's disappearance, a detail he initially left out when questioned by the police. This new information led the authorities to seize both his mother's car and his own pickup truck for forensic examination. But unfortunately, no evidence was discovered. As part of the investigation, detectives wanted to speak with Christopher and Nathan again, since both had been with David that evening. Christopher was invited to the police station for further questioning, where he recounted the same story as before. He also agreed to take a polygraph test, which showed no signs of dishonesty. After leaving the police station and returning to work, Christopher noticed Sheriff Clark's car and signaled for him to stop. As the sheriff of Whitton, where Christopher lived, Clark had known him since childhood. Sheriff Clark was close friends with Christopher's foster parents and was someone Christopher had always looked up to and sought advice from in times of need. Sheriff Clark met with Christopher to discuss Rowan's disappearance. Although familiar with the case, Clark hadn't been directly involved since the investigation was led by the Stella Department. During their conversation, Clark noticed that Christopher was acting strangely, which led him to suspect that Christopher might be hiding something. Given the gravity of the situation and Rowan's uncertain fate, Clark shared his concerns with the FBI. His call prompted investigators to consider the possibility that Christopher might be withholding crucial information that could link Rowan's stepfather to her disappearance. They wondered if Christopher's actions were directed by Rowan's stepfather to lie, and whether Christopher feared being seen as an accomplice if he told the truth. Sheriff Clark told the FBI agents that he had a close relationship with Christopher and offered to help persuade him to cooperate. That evening, Christopher visited Colleen's house to ask about the search progress. FBI agents also arrived to speak with Colleen again and saw Christopher there. They asked him questions, and he repeated his previous account. However, Christopher then mentioned for the first time that he didn't rule out David's possible involvement in Rowan's disappearance. He expressed his willingness to help uncover the truth, even if it was terrible, and suggested wearing a wire to talk to David and try to get him to confess. The detectives decided against this approach. Instead, they asked Christopher to suggest locations where David might have hidden Rowan's body. Christopher provided several locations, which the police searched the next morning. Meanwhile, FBI agents questioned David again, but he continued to deny any involvement. Detectives searched Christopher's home for leads, but the search yielded no results. Meanwhile, Christopher visited the sheriff's office to discuss his encounter with the FBI with Clark. During their conversation, the sheriff sensed that Christopher was holding back information. After their meeting, Clark reached out to the detectives again, suggesting that Christopher might be withholding crucial information that helped prove David's involvement in the case. The FBI agents asked the sheriff to persuade Christopher to open up, as he had been in regular contact with Clark to discuss the case. It seemed that Christopher wanted to share important details but was hesitant to do so for unknown reasons. The following day, November 7th, the police asked Christopher to return to the station. They requested his permission to search a safe located in David's house, where Christopher had been living temporarily and still had some belongings. Christopher agreed to the search and also allowed the police to search his trailer and car. Additionally, Christopher voluntarily provided a DNA sample and agreed to answer the detectives' questions again. During the questioning, he was asked to confirm David's story, but this time, Christopher revealed that his friend's account was not entirely accurate. The investigators then pressed him to disclose what really happened that evening. Christopher became agitated when the police treated him like a suspect in Rowan's disappearance. He refused to continue the conversation and left the station after warning the detectives that he might hire a lawyer. Later that evening, Christopher met with Sheriff Clark to express his concerns about the detectives' behavior. Clark acknowledged Christopher's right to remain silent but explained that the police were doing everything possible to find Rowan. Christopher stated that he would no longer cooperate with the detectives and would only speak with Clark if he had any further information to share. Clark continued to encourage Christopher to open up, and eventually, Christopher broke down in tears, claiming that he loved Rowan and would never harm her. During his time living with the David family, Christopher formed a close bond with Rowan and the other children. They grew to treat him like one of their own, even affectionately referring to him as Uncle Christopher. Sheriff Clark realized that Christopher was on the verge of revealing crucial information, but just as he was about to open up, a visitor arrived at the police station, briefly distracting Clark and causing Christopher to leave. Sheriff Clark reached out to the FBI, updating them on his conversation with Christopher. Clark explained that Christopher was almost ready to disclose what he knew, but warned that pressuring him too hard could lead to him becoming defensive and seeking the help of a lawyer. Clark recommended giving Christopher time to reflect, and the detectives agreed. The search for Rowan continued the following day but yielded no results. However, a new clue came on November 9th, exactly 1 week after her disappearance. Search teams converged on a remote area near the town of Powell, about 10 miles from Stella, and made a significant discovery in the fields and woods, a large pit in the ground. When authorities searched the area, they found Rowan's body hidden under leaves and debris. She was not wearing any clothing from the waist down except for a pair of stockings. A medical examination revealed signs of strangulation and evidence of a sexual assault. After the discovery, FBI agents reached out to Sheriff Clark, asking him to speak with Christopher again, hoping Christopher would now be more forthcoming. Sheriff Clark learned that earlier that morning, Christopher had visited the station, looking for him, and told other officers that he needed to speak with Clark urgently. Sheriff Clark then began searching for Christopher, checking all his usual locations, but he was nowhere to be found. This continued until Christopher contacted Sheriff Clark himself, sounding distressed and asking if he was being followed. Christopher explained that after hearing about Rowan's body, he had driven around town to clear his head and noticed a gray car following him. Sheriff Clark assures Christopher that he knows nothing about the surveillance and suggests they meet in person. When they met, Christopher appeared nervous and expressed concerns for his safety. He feared that with Rowan's body found, he might be accused of murder and that someone might seek revenge against him. Clark took Christopher to the police station, and he said that now when the case had been classified as a homicide, it was time for Christopher to reveal everything he knew. However, when Clark asked Christopher to share what David had done to Rowan, Christopher became emotional and hesitant to talk at the station. He explained that there were too many people around and suggested they move to a quieter location. Clark agreed, and they drove to a small bridge a few miles outside of town. Once they arrived, Christopher asked Clark to handcuff him. Clark was surprised but tried to reassure Christopher that it wasn't necessary. Christopher insists that what he is about to say will change everything and that Clark will then have to arrest him. Christopher then began recounting the events of that night. He told Clark that he, Nathan, and David had gone to his trailer to continue drinking. Later, his friends decided it was time to head home. Nathan gave David a ride, and they chose to take back roads to avoid the police. Christopher had shocked Clark that he had intended to sexually assault Rowan. To carry out his plan, Christopher took advantage of the time when his friends were busy taking a detour through the field. He drove straight to David's house via the main highway. Under the cover of darkness, he slipped into Rowan's room, picked her up, and quietly transported her to his vehicle, carefully avoiding detection as she slept. When they reached his trailer, he sexually assaulted Rowan. This was interrupted when Rowan regained consciousness and tried her best to free herself, but to no avail. During the crime, Christopher took precautions to avoid recognition, deliberately choosing to keep the lights off and maintain his silence. He originally planned to return Rowan to her home under the guise of innocence, but under the illumination of a bright moon, Rowan finally laid eyes on Christopher as he transported her from the trailer. He grabbed a rope, resorted to force to resolve his predicament, and took Rowan's life with his bare hands. He frantically thought of ways to cover up his crime. He got in his car and began driving around the county, pondering methods of disposing of the body. He then remembered a large pit near a neighboring town and headed in that direction. When he arrived, he dumped Rowan's body in the hole and attempted to cover it with tree branches. Returning to the trailer, Christopher discovered traces of Rowan's blood on his clothes and mattress. He also realized he needed to dispose of her pants, underwear, and the rope used to kill her. He gathered these items and placed them in a large barrel, intending to burn them. However, he quickly reconsidered, realizing that a large fire would likely attract unwanted attention. Instead, Christopher dragged the barrel into a shed, closed the door, and started the fire inside. This revelation shocked Clark, who had previously suspected David of committing the crime and believed Christopher was withholding information. It was difficult for Clark to accept that a man he had known for nearly 20 years, a man with 3 young children of his own, was capable of such brutality. Although Christopher appears to be a good-natured man, his true nature is much more worrying. After finishing his story, Christopher willingly went to the police station with Clark. Once there, Christopher repeated his confession to the FBI agents and was subsequently arrested for murder. He also gave the authorities permission to search his trailer and car. As he concluded his confession, Christopher expressed regret over his actions and stated that he had cried uncontrollably the following day. The detectives then informed David about Christopher's confession. Given David's suspicious behavior and inconsistent statements, they suspected he might be covering for his friend. However, during interrogation, David revealed a shocking new testimony. David claimed that when he found Rowan missing from her room, he suspected Christopher might have taken her. He took his mother's car and drove to Christopher's trailer. He found Rowan lying on the bed. Christopher leaned towards her. Instead of rescuing Rowan, David joined in and also sexually assaulted her. He then helped Christopher kill her and dispose of her body. David reported that during that traumatic incident, his brain went into shock, and he had no memory of the night for several days. The detectives, surprised by this new information, re-questioned Christopher to verify David's claim. However, Christopher maintained that David was not involved and that incident unfolded as he had initially described. The inconsistencies puzzled the detectives, but Christopher's account still matched incident that had occurred. Medical examination revealed that the victim was strangled with a thin rope, a detail that only the killer would be aware of. A search of the trailer led to the discovery of a barrel containing ashes, and hair similar to Rowan's was found in Christopher's car. Although investigators were still uncertain about the truthfulness of each man's account, both David and Christopher made incriminating statements. As a result, David was also arrested, and the case was sent to court for further proceedings. During the trial, Christopher requested that his statements be excluded from the case, arguing that he was not aware they could be used against him and that the police had violated his rights. However, the judge rejected this request, as all of Christopher's conversations with investigators were voluntary. Christopher also attempted to present mitigating circumstances, citing his difficult childhood as a factor. He had been shuffled between biological and foster parents from a young age, which had a significant impact on him. Despite these efforts, Christopher was unable to avoid punishment. In 2012, 5 years after the murder, Christopher was sentenced to death. He appealed the sentence, but was unsuccessful. In contrast, David's situation was more complex. Although he admitted to assaulting and killing Rowan, his account conflicted with Christopher's statements, creating a significant problem. If the prosecution had charged David with murder, it could have potentially led to Christopher's conviction being overturned, allowing David to avoid accountability as well. However, due to the lack of concrete evidence, such as DNA, in fact, they were still uncertain about David's involvement. Although it was possible that David might have collaborated with Christopher in committing the crime, there was no supporting evidence for this theory. To minimize the risk of overturning Christopher's sentence, the prosecution made the difficult decision to reduce David's charges. As a result, David pleaded guilty to 2 lesser charges: child endangerment and obstruction of justice. David received an 11 years prison sentence, with a minimum of 5 years to be served. This outcome sparked widespread outrage, as many felt that if David was indeed involved in the murder, his punishment was disproportionately lenient. Unfortunately, this sentence is now final, and it is unlikely that David will face retrial for this case. Christopher remains in prison awaiting execution, but it's uncertain whether the death penalty will be carried out due to the often lengthy time between sentencing and execution, which can span decades, meaning he might spend the rest of his life in prison instead. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ollie Kemp. Alexandra Ollie Elizabeth Kemp was born October 11, 1982, in Leawood. She was the oldest of 3 children and the only daughter of her parents. After graduating high school with honors, Alexandra enrolled at Kansas State University. Following her freshman year, she returned to her hometown of Leawood for summer break. During her break, Alexandra took a part-time job at a local outdoor swimming pool near her parents' house, where her younger brother Tyler already worked. The pool was a quiet neighborhood spot, catering mainly to local residents, and it still operates today. On June 18, 2002, Alexandra reported to work on an overcast day because resulted in fewer visitors than usual. At 5 p.m., Tyler arrived at the pool to start his shift, but his sister Alexandra was nowhere to be found. Her phone and purse were still on the table where she usually sat, which made Tyler confused and worried. He immediately called his parents to report that Alexandra had vanished. Their father, Roger Kemp, rushed to the scene and began searching for his daughter. He first checked the pool, but it was empty. Next, he went to the small pump room near the pool, which contained equipment for water purification, a ladder, and other items. Upon entering the pump room, Roger didn't see anything out of the ordinary at first. However, he soon noticed a leg protruding from under a tarp. As he lifted the tarp, he was met with a horrific sight: his daughter Alexandra, brutally beaten and naked from the waist down, with multiple bruises on her face and body. Roger quickly called 911 and spoke with the operator. When the ambulance arrived, Roger was performing CPR on his daughter. The paramedics took Alexandra to the hospital, but despite their best efforts, she sadly did not survive. Alexandra was declared dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. An examination revealed that the cause of death was strangulation, despite the presence of multiple severe injuries. A thorough investigation found no evidence of forced intimacy, although her body was partially unclothed. The police collected DNA samples from Alexandra's body and secured the pool area, searching for clues to identify the perpetrator. Evidence of a struggle was evident in the room where Roger discovered Alexandra's body, including her flip-flops found in separate locations. Additionally, an open bottle of antiseptic gel and its cap were found at the scene. A few days later, while the police continued to investigate, Alexandra's family and hundreds of mourners gathered to pay their respects at a funeral ceremony. Phil Howes, Alexandra's boyfriend since high school, was initially suspected in her death. As a pool administrator, he worked the morning shift on the day of her death, and Alexandra arrived at noon to start her 5-hour shift. Although Phil often stayed after work to spend time with Alexandra, he left promptly after his shift that day because they had plans for the evening. Despite being an early suspect, Phil had a solid alibi and was quickly cleared by the police. In an interview with detectives, Phil mentioned that Alexandra often felt uncomfortable being alone at work because some of the lawn maintenance workers would stare at her and try to flirt. The police investigated the lawn workers, but each of them had an alibi. However, the inquiry wasn't entirely fruitless. Several workers reported seeing a suspicious man with a video camera lurking in the bushes near the pool the day before Alexandra's death, apparently watching the female lifeguards in swimsuits. The police were given conflicting reports about Alexandra's final hours. Some people said she left the scene in an old Ford pickup truck, while others mentioned different circumstances. A study of Alexandra's mobile phone activity revealed that she had made plans with a friend, Laurel, to meet on the day she died. However, Alexandra didn't show up. When Laurel went to the police station to give her account of events, she explained that Alexandra had asked her to come to the pool to keep her company until her shift ended. According to Laurel, the pool was empty that day due to the poor weather, which made Alexandra anxious. When Laurel arrived at the pool at around 2:30 p.m., she didn't see Alexandra anywhere. Instead, a man she didn't know emerged from the pool house and waved at her with a smile. Laurel thought this man might be Alexandra's boss, and she decided to leave so as not to get her friend in trouble for socializing during work hours. At the time, she had no reason to think that anything was amiss. The police investigation led them away from Alexandra's workplace and to a completely different suspect. As a witness, Laurel provided a detailed description of the person she believed committed the crime. The police used this description to create a sketch of the suspect, who was identified as a white man around 30 years old, with a stocky build, short brown hair, and driving a 1980 Ford pickup truck. The suspect's identity was narrowed down when someone recognized the description as matching James Strader, a local mechanic who owned an old Ford pickup truck. James was questioned by the police and appeared to match the sketch, but he denied any involvement in Alexandra's death. His employer verified his alibi, stating that James was at work on the day of the murder. As a result, James was released from custody. While the police had eliminated James as a suspect, forensic analysis of evidence collected from the crime scene revealed male DNA on an antiseptic gel tube and on Alexandra's body. Unfortunately, the DNA did not match anyone in the police database, leaving the case still unsolved. Alexandra's family, friends, and boyfriend were ruled out as suspects after DNA tests showed no match with the DNA samples found on her body. The investigation was driven by Alexandra's father, Roger Kemp, who was determined to find his daughter's killer. After losing his child, Roger felt like he had lost his purpose in life. However, he found a new reason to keep going: justice for Alexandra. In an interview, Roger explained his approach: "You can either give up or keep fighting. I chose to fight." Impressed by his dedication, the police department gave Roger a workspace where he could collect and share information and collaborate with the investigators. As they explored all available leads, Roger and the investigators contacted the popular TV show America's Most Wanted and asked them to feature Alexandra's case. The show's producers agreed, and her story was aired. The episode generated hundreds of calls from viewers with potential tips. Although the authorities thoroughly investigated each lead, none of them led to a breakthrough, and the case stalled once again. In February 2003, 8 months after Alexandra's death, a promising new lead emerged. Following a thorough investigation, police in Utah apprehended a suspect. 3 separate witnesses, including 2 women and a 14-year-old girl, came forward to report being forced into intimate encounters with a man. He had managed to evade capture initially, but was eventually tracked down and arrested in Utah. The arrested individual was identified as James Strader, the same person who had been questioned by Kansas police earlier. Notably, James bore a strong physical resemblance to the suspect's composite sketch. James was questioned by the police, but they failed to collect his DNA sample at the time. This might have been because his employer had convinced the police that James was at work on the day of the crime and had not left the premises. Despite this, James denied any involvement in Alexandra Kemp's death. Although he resembled the suspect in the composite sketch, James claimed he had not been near the pool on the day of the crime. He eventually provided a DNA sample for analysis. The results indicates that his DNA did not match the DNA found on Alexandra's body or the antiseptic gel tube. James was later imprisoned for unrelated charges, and the investigation into Alexandra Kemp's death hit a dead end once again. A year after Alexandra's death, the police still had no leads. Roger Kemp, Alexandra's father, and Phil House, her boyfriend, continued to fight for justice. Phil, who was also the president of the student community, sent the composite sketch of the suspect to students at other universities via email and asked them to watch an episode of America's Most Wanted that featured Alexandra Kemp's case. A year had passed, but the police and relatives' efforts had yielded no results in the Alexandra Kemp case. Undeterred, Roger Kemp, Alexandra's father, continued his quest for justice. He reached out to the America's Most Wanted program again, requesting a rerun of the episode about Alexandra's death. The show's creators asked if there were any new developments, and although Roger replied that there were none, his determination impressed them, leading to the episode being aired again. The rerun generated a fresh wave of calls to the police, prompting Roger to offer a $25,000 reward for any information that could help identify the person responsible for his daughter's death. The city of Leawood authorities increased the reward to $50,000. Roger also distributed flyers featuring his daughter's photo, a sketch of the suspect, and details about the reward. As Roger drove along the highway, he noticed billboards and realized they could be an effective way to raise awareness about the case. He began contacting advertising agencies to inquire about the cost of posting the information on a billboard. When he called the Lamar Advertising Company, the owner refused to take his money, offering to display the information on multiple billboards for free instead. Roger decided to publicize a sketch of the suspect and reward information on billboards along a major highway. The police received hundreds of tips, which took time to investigate. Notably, multiple tips mentioned the same individual, Teddy Hoover, who owned an old Ford pickup truck and worked in pool maintenance. His appearance matched the suspect's sketch, making it unlikely to be a coincidence. The police launched a search for Teddy Hoover and found his address in Kansas. When they arrived, Teddy answered the door, appearing surprised and nervous. However, this reaction didn't necessarily imply guilt, as many people become nervous when confronted by the police. When questioned about his whereabouts on June 18, 2002, Teddy claimed he couldn't remember, which was understandable given the year time lapse. Teddy denied any involvement in maintaining the pool where Alexandra worked. Nevertheless, the detectives asked him to provide a voluntary DNA sample to rule him out as a suspect. Teddy declined, stating he needed to consult with a lawyer first. He promised to contact the police after speaking with his attorney. The next day, Teddy's lawyer reached out to the investigators, expressing his client's concerns about his DNA sample being added to a database. Teddy reportedly believed in various conspiracy theories and feared that if he cooperated with the police, they would use the information against him in other cases. In an effort to alleviate his concerns, the investigators promised not to enter his DNA into any database and only use it to compare with the DNA found on Alexandra Kemp. The lawyer agreed to speak with his client and said he would call back. As they waited for the call, the police reviewed the case materials again and stumbled upon a piece of paper in one of the folders with a name that caught their attention. On the day of Alexandra's death, detectives began questioning onlookers who had gathered by the pool, trying to determine if anyone had seen anything suspicious. Interestingly, one of the people they spoke with was Teddy Hoover, who had claimed he had never been to the crime scene before. As the investigation continued, detectives grew increasingly confident that Teddy Hoover might be the man they had been searching for over the past 2 years. After several days, investigators contacted Teddy's lawyer to ask if his client was willing to provide a DNA sample. However, the lawyer responded by stating that his client had refused his services and broken off contact. Police immediately went to Teddy's house, but he had already escaped. As a result, the 29-year-old suspect was placed on the National Wanted list. Despite the efforts of the detectives, Teddy managed to evade capture for months. Billboards featuring his image were still up, but the search had yielded nothing. It wasn't until September 2004, when an anonymous caller contacted the police, that a new lead emerged. According to the caller, he knew the name of Teddy's girlfriend, with whom Teddy was living in Kansas. Detectives sought to locate Laura Barr, a woman connected to Teddy Hoover, but discovered she had left the state at the same time he escaped. This led them to investigate further. The U.S. Postal Service informed the Kansas State Police that Laura was receiving mail in Litchfield, Connecticut, along with a man named Benjamin Appleby, at the same address. The house where they resided was secluded and located in a rural area. Authorities suspected that Benjamin Appleby might be an alias for Teddy Hoover. To aid in the investigation, detectives from Leawood contacted the Connecticut State Police, requesting their assistance in locating Benjamin. It was discovered that he had a prior record in Connecticut, with an outstanding arrest warrant stemming from a 1997 incident where he had exposed himself to a schoolgirl. However, Benjamin had evaded capture and fled the state. With the existing warrant, detectives proceeded to the address associated with Benjamin's mail. Upon arrival, they found him at home and immediately took him into custody. As suspected, Benjamin Appleby was confirmed to be Teddy Hoover. It was revealed that while detectives in Kansas had been seeking a DNA sample from Teddy in connection with Alexandra Kemp's death, he had returned to Connecticut and resumed using his real name, attempting to maintain a low profile and escape notice. To apprehend Benjamin, detectives from Leawood traveled to Connecticut, anticipating that he would once again claim innocence. Before bringing him in for questioning, they devised a plan to unsettle him. They filled the interrogation room with crime scene photos and pictures of Alexandra, and placed folders with his name on the table, creating the illusion that the investigation had substantial evidence against him. When Benjamin entered the interrogation room, he was visibly shaken and unable to speak. A detective confronted him, inquiring about the implications of obtaining his DNA sample. Shortly after, Benjamin broke down in tears, confessing to Alexandra's death. He then recounted the events of the fateful June day, explaining that he had noticed Alexandra, found her attractive, and attempted to flirt with her. When she entered the pump room, he followed her, locked the door, and trapped her inside. When Benjamin touched she fought back, leaving him feeling humiliated. In a fit of anger, he attacked her, beating and strangling her until she lost consciousness. Benjamin then attempted to take advantage of her body, undressing her partially. He retrieved a tube of antiseptic gel from a first aid kit, intending to use it as a lubricant. However, just as he was about to proceed, the sound of a car horn distracted him. The victim's friend, who was waiting in a car behind a fence, had noticed something was amiss and sounded the horn. Fearing he would be caught, Benjamin hastily covered the body and fled the scene. Later, Benjamin returned to the area, where he encountered Alexandra's friend, whom he greeted with a smile and a wave, trying to appear nonchalant. He then got into his pickup truck and drove away. Hours later, Benjamin returned to the crime scene again, this time blending in with the crowd of onlookers gathered near the pool. The DNA evidence ultimately led to Benjamin's downfall. Tests revealed that the DNA found on the tube of antiseptic gel and on Alexandra's body matched Benjamin's. Thanks in large part to the efforts of investigator Roger Kemp, the police were finally able to identify the man responsible for Alexandra's murder, more than 2 years after the crime was committed. Benjamin Appleby claimed he initially wanted to plead guilty to avoid putting Alexandra's family through further emotional distress. However, at his first court hearing, he suddenly declared his innocence, stating that his confession was made under duress. Despite this, DNA analysis revealed that his DNA was the only sample found on the victim's body, making it difficult to dispute his involvement. Benjamin's lawyers attempted to argue that their client did not intentionally take Alexandra's life, admitting that he was responsible for her death but claiming it was not premeditated. However, forensic experts pointed out that Benjamin had strangled Alexandra for approximately 10 minutes, during which time he could have stopped but chose not to. The prosecution argued that Benjamin's sole intention was to observe Alexandra. On the day of the incident, June 18, 2002, the pool area was empty due to cloudy weather, allowing Benjamin to take advantage of the situation. He was found guilty by a jury in December 2005 and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, as well as an additional 19 years for attempting to force Alexandra into intimacy. In 2019, Benjamin appealed the decision, but the court upheld the life imprisonment sentence for first-degree murder. The Court of Appeal also ruled that the attempt to force Alexandra into intimacy was already taken into account during the initial sentencing. Benjamin was sentenced twice for the same crime, prompting the court to overturn the second conviction. However, even if Benjamin is released on parole, he will be 81 years old by that time. The authorities involved in the case credit Roger Kemp's persistence for helping them catch the culprit. While Benjamin was in prison, Roger and his wife established a self-defense program for girls, teaching thousands of girls and women across the country basic self-defense techniques. Roger Kemp's tireless efforts to bring attention to the case and his work in creating a safe community did not go unnoticed. He was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal by Barack Obama at the White House. Until his passing at 77 on March 1, 2022, Roger continued to work for the foundation he established in his daughter's name. His ultimate goal was to make a difference in at least one person's life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kani Alm. Kani Alm was born on July 18, 1974, in Malaysia. She was the younger of two daughters and enjoyed a very close relationship with her parents. In 1995, Kani moved to the United States to pursue higher education and a career in information technology. While living in the United States, Kani met a man named Brandon. He was a U.S. citizen and an ethnic Chinese whose parents emigrated from Singapore over 20 years ago. Initially, Kani and Brandon were just friends, but their friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Brandon became a significant figure in Kani's life, supporting and helping her in various ways. They got married in 2001. Kani's life was on track in 2003. She was working as an analyst in San Diego, planning a future with her husband, and hoping to start a family. Her life changed dramatically that year. The trouble began when Kani's father, Ong Bai Young, was diagnosed with cancer. Kani decided to fly to Malaysia to support her family during this difficult time. On June 1, 2003, Kani and her husband, Brandon, arrived in Malaysia. However, Brandon returned to the USA after a few days, leaving Kani to care for her father in Kuala Lumpur. Despite the distance, Kani and Brandon stayed close through daily phone calls. They would talk for hours, sharing stories about their daily lives, including their two pets. Kani's father underwent surgery to remove a kidney, but fortunately, his health began to recover. As he improved, Kani planned her return to the USA, scheduling a flight for June 14, 2003. Kani organized a farewell dinner at a local restaurant the evening before her departure, and she invited her mother, sister, and closest friends to join her. That evening, June 13, 2003, Kani and her mother arrived at the designated meeting spot later than the others. They had trouble finding a parking spot in front of the mall, so Kani parked in the underground lot. However, her mother was concerned about the poor lighting in the lot, rather than the parking fee. Once they arrived at the second-floor restaurant, Kani was excited to reunite with her childhood friends, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. They spent a few hours catching up, but Kani soon noticed that her mother, Pearlie, was starting to look tired. When Kani asked if her mother wanted to head home, Pearlie said she had a lot to do that day, but was okay with leaving early and promised her friends she would be back soon. Kani, her mother, and her sister Elsie got up from the table to pay for their parking. They went to the payment terminal, which was located on the first floor, a floor above the underground parking lot. As they waited in line for the terminal, Canny realized she had left the parking ticket in their car. She asked her sister and mother to stay in line while she went back down to retrieve the ticket. Elsie and Pearlie waited for 10 more minutes, but Canny still hadn't returned. Then, her sister started calling her. The first call went unanswered, and the second one was sent to voicemail. This was unusual, and Elsie and Pearlie immediately sensed that something was wrong. They quickly went to the parking lot, where they were shocked to find that Canny's car was no longer there. They searched the parking lot several times to make sure, and after confirming that the car was indeed gone, they realized that Canny must have disappeared along with it. Pearlie was certain that something had happened to her daughter, as Canny would never leave without saying anything. Although the parking lot was poorly lit, it had surveillance cameras that might provide some clues about what had happened. The mall security initially refused to show Canny's relatives the footage, but relented after her mother begged for their help. At midnight, Pearlie and Elsie sat in front of a monitor and watched the shocking footage, which confirmed their worst fears. The footage revealed Canny's car speeding out of the underground parking lot, crashing through the barrier. Although the footage quality was poor, it was evident that a man was driving, with Canny in the passenger seat. Her body was positioned as if she was trying to distance herself from the driver, leaning against the door. Upon seeing the footage, Pearlie immediately filed a disappearance and kidnapping report at a police station. The police launched an investigation, while Canny's family and friends drove around Kuala Lumpur, desperately searching for her purple proton tiara. Meanwhile, Brandon, Canny's husband, began to feel a sense of unease. He tried calling his wife multiple times, but she didn't answer. He then contacted her mother, who informed him about the events that had transpired. The news of Canny's disappearance left Brandon in shock. Pearlie could hear him sobbing over the phone. As dawn broke, Canny's friends and family reluctantly returned home, their search efforts having yielded no results. The police disseminated information about the disappearance and conducted their own search, but unfortunately, it didn't lead to any breakthroughs. Even the footage from the mall's parking lot where Canny was kidnapped failed to provide any leads on identifying the driver of the car. More than 72 hours have passed since Canny's loved ones last saw her. Authorities believe that if she was kidnapped, it wasn't for ransom. If money was the motive, the kidnapper would have demanded it by now. A disturbing find was made by police when they discovered Canny's car left empty on a city street. The front right tire was severely damaged, indicating it had been driven on while flat for some time, causing it to shred. In the back of the car, a large red stain was found on the passenger seat. Forensic experts collected evidence, including scrapings from the back seat, fingerprints from the steering wheel, and other parts of the car. There were many clues found in the vehicle. Canny's family and friends held on to hope and prayed for her safe return. However, their hopes were crushed the next day after her car was found. On June 17th, a road worker detected a strong, foul smell coming from a manhole near the highway. Upon lifting the lid, he discovered a body that someone had attempted to burn using 2 car tires and sticks. A team of leading forensic experts from the Royal Malaysian Police immediately arrived at the scene. They found 2 car tires filled with concrete, which had been used as stands for road signs, lying on top of the body. It appeared that whoever had hidden the body, trying to make it harder to identify. Although the discovery of the body seemed to confirm the family's worst fears, Canny's mother, Pearlie, refused to believe that her daughter was dead without official confirmation. "Until they confirm it, we will continue to hope that she will turn up alive," she said. The family went to the morgue, but the doctor said that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body yet. Canny's family members provided DNA samples for comparative analysis. Unfortunately, the results confirmed their worst nightmare. The body was indeed that of their daughter, Canny. Some sources claim that before the DNA test results, Kenny's family identified the jewelry on the body. However, as a loving mother, Purley held on to the hope that her daughter was still alive until the very end. The emotional torture she endured is unimaginable. The autopsy revealed that Kenny had 2 stab wounds to her abdomen, and a medical forensics expert found signs of strangulation. A cloth was tied around her neck in multiple knots, and semen was found inside her body, which served as a source of DNA. A few days after the body was discovered, an incident raised questions about the work of police. An undercover policeman, Subramaniam Ravichandran, reported to his superiors that on the night of Kenny's disappearance, he was on duty with his partner, patrolling the streets of Kuala Lumpur at night on their motorcycles. Both officers were dressed in civilian clothes. They noticed a car parked incorrectly, taking up half the road, and stopped to investigate if anyone was inside. Ravichandran approached the driver's door and saw a man behind the wheel with a woman in the passenger seat. He knocked on the window, and when the man lowered it partially, Ravichandran displayed his police ID and asked what they were doing. The driver replied they were just chatting and not doing anything illegal. Ravichandran then requested to see their IDs. As the driver handed over the documents, she in the passenger seat made unusual hand gestures, seemingly asking for help, but stopped whenever her assumed boyfriend looked at her. Noticing this, Ravichandran asked the driver to step out of the car. However, the driver responded aggressively, claiming Ravichandran was not a police officer but a thief. He then raised the window and reached for the ignition. Realizing the car might drive off, Ravichandran drew his pistol and shot the right front wheel. Despite this, the car sped away. Ravichandran and his partner pursued on a motorcycle but were unable to catch up, which is puzzling given the car had a flat tire. At the time, the Malaysian Police Department was in a state of disarray, which might explain why the officer didn't call for backup or report the incident. The car with a flat tire was a purple Proton Tiara, driven by 27-year-old Ahmad Najib bin Aris, accompanied by a woman named Kenny Alm. Although the police chase did not result in an immediate arrest, the officers managed to obtain documents from the driver. Tragically, Kenny Alm was later found dead. It is possible that if the officer had acted differently during the encounter, the outcome might have been different. Unfortunately, Ravichandran only informed his superiors about the incident after Kenny's body was discovered. The only positive outcome of that night was that the police had obtained documents that could help identify the suspect. Besides Kenny's family, many Malaysians attended her farewell ceremony. Her death was a devastating loss for her husband, Brandon. Meanwhile, the police launched a search for Ahmad Najib. They discovered that he didn't live at the address listed in his documents, but his name was genuine, providing multiple leads to track him down. The police searched for Ahmad Najib's name in the Registry of Documented Marriages and the National Agency of Social Support. They found a match, revealing that Ahmad Najib bin Aris was born and raised in Muar, Malaysia. He was the second of 4 siblings and had dropped out of school to work and support his family. In 1998, he moved from Muar to Kuala Lumpur, where he got married and had 2 children. Since 2000, he had worked as a cabin cleaner for Malaysia Airlines. Knowing the name of Ahmad Najib's wife and her workplace, the police began surveillance. She worked at a metropolitan bank, and after her shift ended, undercover police officers followed her to determine her home address. Now that they knew where Ahmad Najib lived, the police had to ensure he was inside the house without alerting him. For 3 days, they monitored the house, but Ahmad Najib didn't appear. At one point, investigators doubted whether Ahmad Najib still lived with his family, but this was a hasty conclusion. On the 4th day of surveillance, at around 4 a.m., a cab pulled up to the house, and Ahmad Najib stepped out. Within a minute, he was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. News of the arrest and the suspect's identity quickly reached the press. Many people who knew Ahmad Najib were shocked to learn that he was suspected of kidnapping and killing Kani Ong. Those who knew him described Ahmad Najib as a devoted husband, a caring father of two, and an overall good person. However, investigators soon discovered that he may have been hiding a darker side. During the initial interrogation, Ahmad Najib remained calm and requested to speak only with the head of the Criminal Investigation Division. It wasn't until he was presented with evidence linking him to Kani Ong that Ahmad Najib began to deny any wrongdoing. His confidence seemed to wane as the evidence mounted. Investigators showed him two IDs that he had given to an officer on the night of Kani Ong's kidnapping. They also revealed that they had found bloodstains on his jacket and jeans, which DNA analysis would likely confirm to be Kani Ong's blood. After realizing the officers had solid evidence and were not bluffing, Ahmad Najib confessed to kidnapping and killing Kani Ong. Within 10 days of the kidnapping, on June 23, 2003, he was taken to court, where he repeated his confession. The police then conducted an investigative experiment where Ahmad Najib showed them all the locations he had been with Kani Ong. He provided a detailed account of how he forced her to be intimate with him multiple times, how he took her life, and how he attempted to dispose of her body. Evidence supporting his statements was found at all the locations he led the police to. The investigation began at the underground parking lot, where cameras captured footage of Ahmad Najib. According to his statement, he was waiting for his former boss, who had fired him and whom he sought revenge against. However, the claim about the former boss was never verified. Hiding in the darkness, he observed Kani Ong searching for something in her car and seized the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. He forcefully pushed her into the car, issuing threats that if she attempted to escape or seek help, she would face dire consequences. Overwhelmed, Kani Ong became disoriented and obediently followed his instructions. Next, he took the driver's seat and sped out of the parking lot. After crashing through a barrier, he stopped in an industrial area, where he began to harass Kani Ong. Just as this was happening, a plainclothes police officer approached the car. Ahmad Najib falsely told the officer that he didn't know he had taken the wrong person until the officer asked him and his victim for their identification. Even assuming Ahmad Najib had intended to kidnap his former boss, his guilt remains unchanged. Undoubtedly, his former boss would have suffered the same fate as Kani Ong. According to Ahmad Najib's account, he managed to evade the pursuing officer. Despite the officer possessing his documents, Ahmad Najib failed to consider releasing Kani Ong. Instead, he stopped the car on the street to replace a tire damaged by a bullet. Nearby, a car containing a woman was parked at the spot where he had pulled over. He approached she and asked for a car jack, intending to change his tire. However, he noticed Kani Ong signaling to she, who then handed him the jack. He abandoned the idea of changing the tire and drove off immediately. Later, he stopped at a secluded area and used a knife to threaten Kani Ong, forcing her to engage in intimate acts with him. Afterwards, he drove to another district where he coerced Kani Ong into satisfying him again, with both of them in the back seat. Kani Ong pleaded for mercy, but he took her life instead. He then disposed of her body in a manhole near a highway, moved the car to another location, and left it there. 16 hours later, he returned to the scene with a gasoline canister in an attempt to conceal evidence of the crime. DNA analysis confirmed that the semen found in Kani Ong's body belonged to Ahmad Najib bin Aris. His DNA was also discovered in the car, along with his fingerprints, providing further irrefutable proof of his guilt. Additionally, the analysis revealed that the blood on his jacket and jeans belonged to Kani Ong. The trial began on September 15, 2003, 3 months after Kani Ong's death. This high-profile case drew widespread attention from the Malaysian media and public. The trial attracted not only ordinary Malaysians and journalists but also individuals seeking to boost their reputation, including numerous attorneys representing Ahmad Najib. Despite admitting guilt during the investigation, overwhelming evidence, including DNA proof, Ahmad Najib changed his stance after consulting 6 attorneys. At his first trial, he claimed his confession was made under police pressure. However, the judge before whom Ahmad Najib confessed immediately after his arrest testified that there were no signs of physical abuse, and Ahmad Najib appeared calm and relaxed. The attorneys then shifted their strategy, arguing that Kani Alm was in the car with Ahmad Najib voluntarily. They suggested that Kani Alm, a black belt in Taekwondo, should have attempted to escape if she were being held against her will. However, this attempt to blame Kani Alm was rejected, as people respond differently to critical situations. However, another claim surfaced, stating that Kani Alm had consensual intimacy with Ahmad Najib and that Kani Alm's death was caused by strangulation used to heighten the experience. Forensic experts disagreed with and rejected this account of what happened. The cloth around Kani's neck was tied in multiple knots, suggesting that Kani Alm had no intention of loosening it. Indeed, the cloth was so tight that the skin beneath was the only area on the body not affected by the fire. Furthermore, the cloth was a type used for cleaning plane windows, and given the defendant's job as a cabin cleaner, this linked him more closely to the crime. Additionally, the lawyers struggled to explain the stab wounds on Kani's body. At this point, Ahmad Najib's attorneys advised him to remain silent and not testify. Many questioned why Kani didn't escape the car when she had at least 2 chances to do so. On February 23, 2005, Ahmad Najib bin Aris was convicted of all charges connected to the crime committed against Kani Alm. The evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator. Ahmad Najib received the maximum sentence under Malaysian law, 20 years imprisonment and 10 strokes of the cane for violating Kani Alm's sexual integrity, plus the death penalty for causing her death. In Malaysia, the death penalty is carried out by hanging, a method that differs significantly from the lethal injection used in some other countries, such as the USA. Ahmad Najib's lawyers attempted to appeal the sentence twice but were unsuccessful both times. In 2010, Ahmad Najib petitioned the head of state to commute his death sentence to life imprisonment, maintaining his innocence. However, his plea for clemency was rejected. More than 13 years after Kani Alm's death, on September 23, 2016, Ahmad Najib's sentence was carried out. He was 40 years old at the time of his execution. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Natasha Kornoyer. Natasha Kornoyer, 37 years old, has gone missing suddenly and without any notice. She didn't visit her mother, respond to phone calls, or return home. As the day went on, it became clear that none of her friends or colleagues had seen her either. Her worried relatives reported her missing at 5 p.m., prompting a police investigation. Natasha worked as a public relations specialist for the Correctional Service of Canada. Detectives began by interviewing her co-workers. Upon arrival, they found her car still parked nearby. A nervous-looking man, Michel Trottier, was standing by her vehicle. He claimed to be in a relationship with Natasha and was trying to figure out where she might have gone. The back door of Natasha's car had scratches, but it was unclear if they were related to her disappearance. With no reason to suspect Michel Trottier of involvement, detectives continued their investigation. Co-workers reported that Natasha was at work on October 1, 2009, the day before she vanished. She seemed to be in a good mood, friendly, and untroubled, with no signs of anything amiss. On October 2, Natasha needed a day off to deal with issues related to her recently deceased father's tombstone. To make up for time, she worked longer hours on October 1 and left the office around 8 p.m. According to her friends, Natasha was a kind and open person with no known conflicts or enemies. The police launched a large-scale search for Natasha, involving aviation and canine units. Initially, they focused on the area around the parking lot but found no clues to aid the investigation. Natasha's friends and relatives distributed flyers with her photo, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The first few hours after a person goes missing are crucial in finding witnesses or evidence. However, in Natasha's case, valuable time was lost because the police weren't notified until the evening of October 2nd, 21 hours after she left work. The search for Natasha took place from October 3rd to 5th, but unfortunately, no leads were found. Her family offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could help locate her. Natasha's boyfriend, Michel Trottier, suspected she had been kidnapped and made a televised plea for her safe release. Meanwhile, the police were investigating their personal lives. They had been together for 4 years, but their relationship had been rocky, with multiple breakups and reconciliations. The police explored all possible scenarios surrounding Natasha's disappearance. They reviewed CCTV footage from her workplace, both inside and outside the building. The footage showed Natasha arriving at 9:04 a.m. and leaving at 8:07 p.m. She had parked her car in a poorly lit area of the parking lot, and the cameras captured her walking towards it. However, she eventually disappeared from view due to the darkness. After a few minutes, the car headlights turned on and the car started moving, but instead of heading towards the exit, it drove to the opposite side of the parking lot, which was also poorly lit. The car stopped and the headlights went out. The vehicle remained in this position for about 20 minutes before moving towards the exit. It was determined that this car was not Natasha's, as she owned a Mazda. Further investigation revealed that the car in the video was a Ford Windstar minivan, which had entered the parking lot at 6:35 p.m. and parked next to Natasha's car. Based on the video footage, the police concluded that Natasha Conoyer's disappearance was likely a kidnapping. On the 5th day of the search, October 6, 2009, the focus shifted from finding a missing person to investigating a homicide. Natasha's body was discovered in a vacant lot in the Point Au Trumbull area, approximately 20 miles from her workplace. The body was located next to a dirt road that led to the riverbank. The news of Natasha's death devastated her relatives and friends, who were further disturbed by the medical examiner's report. According to the report, Natasha's cause of death was strangulation. Additionally, she had suffered 9 facial injuries, including a broken nose, and had marks on her wrists and ankles indicating that she had been bound. Seminal fluid was also found inside her body, which would serve as a source of DNA evidence. While awaiting DNA analysis results, detectives attempted to identify the owner of a minivan captured on camera the day Natasha vanished. In 2009, there were 2 motels near Natasha's workplace. On October 16, 2009, 10 days after her body was discovered, police visited both motels to review guest registration cards. At the Lido Motel, they found a guest who had registered a Ford Windstar. The guest was 48 years old Claude LaRouche, a registered sex offender with 2 prior convictions. In 1993, Claude was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 2 years of probation for coercing a 19-year-old acquaintance into sex. In 2005, he received a 40-month prison sentence for attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old girl. She managed to escape and run to a neighbor's house. Claude's 40-month sentence for the attempted kidnapping of a child raises questions about the severity of his punishment. In November 2008, Claude was released and started working as a carpenter. He married a woman with 2 sons, and they all lived together in a house about a 10-minute drive from where Natasha Conoyer disappeared. Detectives found out Claude checked into a motel the night Natasha went missing. Forensic experts examined the motel room and discovered dark red stains on the carpet, which they sent for analysis. The same day, detectives visited Claude at his home. Since he had a prior prison record, the police already had his DNA on file. However, they needed time to compare it to the DNA found on Natasha's body. Claude claimed he didn't know Natasha but admitted to frequently visiting the Lido motel because it was cheap. He told the detectives he was unhappy with his intimate life with his wife and often rented a motel room to meet women offering paid sex services. When asked about his whereabouts on October 1st, the day Natasha disappeared, Claude said he couldn't remember anything, including staying at the Lido motel. He attributed his memory loss to excessive substance use, but his memory partially returned soon after. On November 5, 2009, a month after the body was discovered, detectives returned to Claude LaRouche's house. This time, however, it was not for a conversation. DNA analysis revealed that the seminal fluid found in Natasha Cournoyer's body matched LaRouche's. Additionally, Natasha's DNA was detected in the motel room Claude rented and inside his car. Montreal police say there's no link between the crime and Cournoyer's job at Correctional Service of Canada, and the victim didn't know the suspect. Following Claude's arrest, Montreal Police Inspector Daniel Rousseau stated that citizens could now feel safer in public. The news of the arrest shocked Claude's neighbors, who described him as a friendly and polite individual. The next day, on November 6, 2009, Claude LaRouche became a suspect in Natasha Cournoyer's case. Initially, he denied any wrongdoing, but faced with substantial evidence, he confessed to taking Natasha's life. However, he claimed her death was accidental and not intentional. During his 2011 trial, two differing accounts of the events emerged, one from Claude and his defense team, and the other from the prosecution. According to Claude's testimony, he was waiting in a parking lot for a drug dealer on the evening in question. While sitting in his car, Natasha appeared beside him. He then attacked her, forced her into his vehicle, and shut the door. Afterwards, Claude conversed with Natasha, and she allegedly agreed to accompany him to a motel. Claude LaRouche experienced memory lapses, which left him unable to recall why he stood in the parking lot for 20 minutes or what he did during that time. However, he conveniently remembered specific moments that worked in his favor. According to LaRouche, Natasha offered to satisfy his demands in exchange for her freedom while they were in the motel room. He agreed, but after she fulfilled his requests, they got into an argument. Claude lost control, attacked Natasha, and ultimately strangled her. He then cleaned the room, moved her body to his car, drove home, and went to bed. The next morning, after the substances he had taken wore off, he realized the gravity of his actions. Claude chose to get rid of Natasha's body. As he drove to the location where the body was later found, he cut her documents and bank cards into pieces and threw them out the car window. However, it's crucial to remember that this account comes from LaRouche himself, and the more he shared, the more inconsistencies and questions emerged about his claims. According to Claude's testimony, the day after disposing of Natasha's body, he returned to the scene and covered her with a blanket, fearing she would freeze. He revisited the body again the next day to retrieve the blanket, worried that it would hinder her discovery. LaRouche's statements suggest that his actions were influenced by a clouded consciousness, leading to illogical decisions. He claimed he did not intend to take Natasha's life, which he attempted to convey to those present during the trial. The prosecution's case relied on physical evidence and a witness testimony. The witness stated that while walking his dog near the parking lot on the day Natasha disappeared, he saw Claude attempt to attack a jogger around 7 p.m. However, Claude retreated when he noticed the witness and his dog. Natasha Cournoyer was attacked an hour later. The prosecutor was convinced that Claude had bound and abducted Natasha, taking her to a motel where she ultimately lost her life. In June 2011, Claude LaRouche was found guilty and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, it was revealed that just 2 weeks after Natasha's murder, Claude attempted to strangle another woman, Dominique Martel. However, she managed to fend him off by biting his finger. As a result, Claude was deemed a dangerous offender under Canadian law, rendering his prison sentence indefinite and significantly reducing his chances of early parole. Natasha had a peaceful and fulfilling life, with aspirations and objectives, all of which were brutally taken away by a man with a history of serious crimes. Despite his past, Claude was allowed to roam free, living among the community without adequate supervision. The fact that he had previously attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old girl raises questions about how he was able to reintegrate into society without proper monitoring. Natasha's loved ones continue to grapple with these unanswered questions, haunted by the thought that if the system had functioned correctly and Claude had been held accountable, Natasha might still be alive today. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Catherine Wells-Burr. Catherine Wells-Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells-Burr. She has an older sister named Lynn. In the summer of 2010, Catherine met Rashal Novak, a 31-year-old co-worker, on a university break while working on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rashal was an immigrant from Poland with a previous marriage and a son, had moved to England 4 years earlier seeking a better life. Rashal and Catherine started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site cafe, but soon progressing to romantic dinners. Rashal showered Catherine with gifts, took Catherine to movies, and went on walks with Catherine. As their relationship deepened, Rashal shared his past and reasons for moving to the UK with Catherine. Rashal's trustworthy nature allows her to open up completely to him. Within a few months, Catherine introduced Rashal to her parents, who welcomed him into their family and hoped for Rashal and Catherine's future happiness. Soon, Rashal and Catherine began planning their wedding. Catherine graduated with honors from Bath Spa University in 2011 and secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. Her career progressed quickly, helping her have good job opportunities. Catherine is smart, highly educated, and has good interaction skills with others. She shows genuine interest in her co-workers' problems and cares for those around her. Her kind demeanor and radiant smile have earned her the admiration of her colleagues, who view her as a young leader. Catherine's career was advancing swiftly, and her substantial earnings, combined with those of her partner Rashal, allowed them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace in Willow Way. Although they were financially secure, they opted to take out a mortgage, securing insurance coverage as per their agreement with the bank. With their youth, successful careers, and love for each other, it seemed they had all the ingredients for happiness. However, the fateful day of September 12, 2012, marked a turning point in their lives, changing everything forever. On September 12, 2012, Orlando, a local resident, was driving home after a night shift at the gas station. He is in a hurry to take his daughter Maria to kindergarten as he promised his wife. While driving, he noticed black smoke coming from a nearby parking lot after turning a sharp corner. Smoke billowed from a car engulfed in flames. Orlando stopped and tried to get a closer look but couldn't due to the intense fire. When firefighters arrived 4 minutes later, the car was completely burned out. The police cordoned off the area to keep onlookers away. The location was relatively deserted due to the early hour, and there were no witnesses to the incident. Upon investigation, a charred body was found. The police needed to identify the victim and determine the cause of death. There were no signs of a car accident or any evidence of another vehicle being involved. The police initially suspected that the car may have caught fire due to a malfunction or self-ignition. A thorough investigation was conducted, involving multiple expert analyses. The remains were sent to a forensic laboratory to determine the identity and cause of death. The police also examined fragments of the burned vehicle to identify any malfunctions and establish the cause of the fire. The police began by checking the missing persons database and recent reports of disappearances. They quickly identified the deceased as 23-year-old Catherine Wells Barr. On the same day, Rashal Novak filed a missing persons report for his girlfriend, Catherine. According to Rashal, he left for work at 5:30 a.m. while Catherine was still asleep. When she failed to show up for work, and Rashal couldn't find her at any of her relatives' homes, he contacted the police. The investigation involved interviewing the victim's family, including her parents and sister, as well as Rashal, her colleagues, and friends. By gathering information about the last days and years of Catherine's life, the police were able to reconstruct the events leading up to her tragic death. The investigation into Catherine's disappearance continued to uncover shocking details about her life with Rashal. As the truth began to emerge, it became clear that their relationship had been built on lies from the start. Rashal, a 29-year-old man from Poland, had left his wife and child behind to escape his debts. He moved to the UK, where he met Anna Levick, with whom he had a long-term relationship starting in 2008. When Rashal met Catherine, he initially maintained relationships with both women. However, he eventually chose Catherine, believing she offered more stability and financial security. Catherine, unaware of Rashal's true intentions, genuinely desired a happy marriage and family with him. Meanwhile, Rashal was secretly planning to kill Catherine, intending to use the life insurance payout and the large house they shared to fund a new life with his mistress, Anna. The murder was carefully planned and executed with exceptional cruelty. On the day Catherine went missing, Rashal waited a few hours before reporting her disappearance to her boss, pretending to be frantically worried about her whereabouts. He feigned panic and despair in front of Catherine's colleagues and relatives, claiming she had been receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. When Catherine's car was found missing and she was not at her parents' home or her own, Rashal's fake concern led Catherine's family to contact the police. Rashal recounted that the evening before her disappearance had been a normal evening. Rashal and Catherine went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, watched TV, and went to bed together. Catherine seemed calm. However, a thorough investigation revealed that her death occurred earlier. She was strangled around 2 a.m., likely in her own bed while asleep. Her body was placed in the car, driven a short distance, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Rashal Novak had a solid alibi, as he was at work from 5:30 a.m. He claimed Catherine was asleep in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m. However, Rashal was still at home at 1:30 a.m., which significantly altered the case's direction. As a result, Rashal Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Wells Barr's murder. The evidence allowed for Rashal to be detained pending further investigation. Rashal claimed that Catherine was being stalked, which had caused her significant distress. However, during the investigation, it was discovered that Catherine had a secret online life. She had accounts on several adult websites, where she shared intimate photos and engaged in flirtatious conversations with men. A letter from a secret admirer was also found. Despite attempts to mislead the investigation, evidence was uncovered that proved Rashal's direct involvement in Catherine's demise. Notably, Rashal had a motive to kill Catherine. Investigators found that he had been in continuous communication with Anna Legwinowicz, and they had met regularly over the past few months. Furthermore, it was discovered that Rashal had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had both taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000. Rashal and Catherine were the sole beneficiaries of each other's policies, meaning they would receive the payouts in the event of the other's death. The main motive behind Catherine's death and the burning of her car to mislead the investigation was found to be a large life insurance payout. On the day she went missing, Catherine sent a message to Anna's phone. Additionally, security cameras showed Anna and her uncle filling a gas can at a gas station a few days before the crime. This new information brought a third person into the investigation. Anna Litvinovich, 32, and her uncle, Tadeusz Dimitrisin, 38, along with Rafal Novak, are suspected of being accomplices in a premeditated crime and arson to cover up evidence. The crime was carefully planned by them over several months. They created accounts on adult websites, uploaded doctored images of Catherine, and created chats with various men to mislead the investigation. When faced with undeniable evidence, Rafal and Anna couldn't deny their involvement any longer and began blaming each other. Rafal claimed that Anna, driven by jealousy, planned and carried out the crime to eliminate Catherine. In contrast, Anna accused Rafal of committing the crime out of greed, seeking to secure the insurance payout for the house. To avoid detection, the conspirators forged much evidence related to Catherine. They created fake profiles about Catherine on dating websites, portraying her as a promiscuous and highly sexual woman. Also, to cover their tracks, the conspirators burned Catherine's body and created a fake story about her. They invented a fictitious lover, and they believed that he might be responsible for Catherine's death. One of the conspirators even sent a text message from Catherine's phone to this fictitious person, suggesting that she was on her way to meet him. However, forensic experts discovered that when the fire broke out, Catherine was only wearing her favorite nightgown, not an appropriate outfit to meet someone. Despite the evidence, Rafal refused to acknowledge his involvement in Catherine's death. Instead, he told Jane, Catherine's mother, that her daughter was receiving threatening emails and text messages from an ex-boyfriend who said if he couldn't have her, no one could. Rafal also claimed that Catherine had spoken of taking her own life. In a shocking display of deceit, Rafal allowed Catherine's parents to comfort him, believing he was also mourning the loss of Catherine he loved. Rafal's acting was incredibly convincing. After Catherine's death, her mother, Jane, was so taken in by his performance that she hugged him and allowed him to call her Mom. Jane explained that in the early stages of the investigation, the police viewed Rafal more as a witness than a suspect, so she decided to offer him her full support. Her reasoning was that if Catherine had loved him that much and he was considered part of their family, then he deserved their support. The trial, chaired by Justice Sharp, began and the jury heard that Rafal and his two co-defendants stood to gain a significant amount from Catherine's death. They hoped to receive a life insurance payout of £123,000 and half ownership of a two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that when police found Catherine's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12, Rafal showed no emotion. Anna Litvinovich frequently shook her head and laughed in court when it was suggested she was responsible for the crime, but refused to testify. Tadeusz also chose not to testify in his defense. The judge, Justice Sharp, told the defendants the murder was a horrific and merciless crime. The defendants showed no emotion during sentencing. The judge described Anna Litvinovich's behavior as deceitful, manipulative, and cruel, and stated she played a significant role in the crime. He also told Tadeusz that the murder was committed for gain, with many aggravating circumstances and no mitigating ones. The judge expressed deep sympathy for Catherine's parents, who had no idea that Rafal Novak's charming facade hid a monster. Rafal's actions were driven by financial gain, as he had no emotional ties to Catherine. Catherine's mother stated that the brutal and calculated manner of her daughter's death would haunt them forever. She regretted not having the chance to say goodbye or express her love, and now considers Rafal an evil person who deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. Catherine's father, Philip, added that they had welcomed Rafal into their home, treating him like a son, only to be betrayed by him. During the trial, Rafal Novak became emotional in the witness box. He denied any involvement in the death of his girlfriend, Catherine Wells Burr. Rashal claimed everyone was blaming him for a crime he did not commit. However, the court heard that Rashal showed no emotion when the police discovered Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12 last year. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells Burr, testified that after his initial release from police custody, Rashal asked for a steak dinner and didn't even mention Catherine. Jane Wells Burr stated that her daughter's fate was sealed when she and Rashal bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believes that in signing the contract, Catherine also signed her own death warrant. Ultimately, the court found Rashal Novak guilty of suffocating Catherine with a pillow while she slept. He had conspired with his secret lover, Anna Legwinowicz, and her uncle, Tadeusz, to claim a £123,000 life insurance payout and a share of the house. Anna and Tadeusz had transported Catherine's body in her car to a remote location and set it on fire. Rashal and Anna were sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 32 years, while Tadeusz received a 27-year sentence. After the verdict, Catherine's parents, Philip and Jane Wells Burr, advocated for stricter immigration laws. They believed that if the UK had more stringent immigration rules, like the US, Rashal Novak would not have been allowed entry. Rashal had previously been convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland. Philip and Jane, who divorced after Catherine's death, blamed the European Union for the UK's lenient immigration policies. Jane stated that the UK does not thoroughly check people entering the country. She was unaware of Rashal's previous assault charge in Poland and believes the government needs to prevent individuals like Rashal from freely entering the country. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother paid tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful, determined, and hard-working individual who earned a first-class degree from the University of Bath Spa. Catherine's family expressed their devastation and loss, stating they were proud of her accomplishments and had no idea how to move forward without her. They believed she had great potential and a promising life ahead, but it was cruelly taken away from her and her loved ones. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Diana Maria Kaur Lopez Pinal. Diana Maria Kaur Lopez Pinal was born on August 12, 1998, in Madrid, to parents Diana Cristina Lopez Pinal and Juan Carlo Kaur. She has a younger sister named Valeria. Her family was wealthy and everyone in the family was very close-knit. But their lives hit a snag in 2013 when Diana's parents divorced. However, the father still visits his daughter regularly on holidays. In the summer of 2016, Diana, her mother, and her younger sister spent their vacation in the small coastal town of Apab du Carmel, a place they had visited many times before. The town, with a population of around 10,000, is a quiet and picturesque retreat away from the hustle and bustle of city life. On the evening of August 21st, Diana told her mother that she was going to meet her friends at Val Inclin Park to celebrate the Feast of the Virgin Carmen. The park was close to their vacation cottage, and Diana often walked there. Her mother gave her permission to go. Diana spent a fun evening with her friends, she unaware that it would be the last time they would see each other. At around 2:30 a.m., she said goodbye to her friends and began her home. On the way, she ran into a friend, Paso de Ariel, near her favorite pizzeria. He was the last person to see Diana that night. The next morning, August 22, 2016, became a nightmare for Diana's mother, Christina. When she realized her daughter hadn't come home from the party, she grew concerned. Diana's phone was off, which only added to her worry. Without hesitation, Christina contacted the police and reported her daughter missing. According to Christina, Diana didn't have any serious emotional or mental health issues, despite her parents' divorce when she was younger. Police opened an investigation into Diana's disappearance, looking into the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Diana's disappearance is a mystery that investigators must unravel. Their first clue came from the last message she sent to a friend in Madrid via WhatsApp. In these messages, Diana mentioned a stranger who was stalking her and shouting strange phrases, causing her to feel scared. Unfortunately, these were her last messages, after which she stopped replying to her friends' messages. During their search, they found a black hair band along the road that resembled the one Diana was wearing that night. Although this was the only evidence found at the scene of her disappearance, it gave investigators a clue to work with. Diana's friends had no information about her disappearance. Additionally, there were no CCTV cameras in the area where she was last seen. The street was dimly lit and deserted, with only a few garages and an old nightclub. Although some people reported seeing Diana get out of a car with 3 men and then get into another car, but these were not corroborated. The investigation into Diana's disappearance considered 2 primary theories. One possibility was that she was kidnapped by someone she knew. The other theory is that she was the victim of a random attack by a mentally unstable individual. Diana's mother proposed a third theory, speculating that her daughter might have been taken away by boat. New information emerged when Diana's friend and ex-boyfriend revealed that she had met a man from Morocco and purchased hashish with him. However, this detail only added to the complexity of the case. The media reported that the clothes Diana wore on the evening of her disappearance had been found, but her mother disputed it, saying it was not true. Several factors suggest that Diana did not leave voluntarily. Her credit cards and identification were still in the house. It suggests Diana's disappearance was forced, but the case remains unsolved and remains a mystery. After Diana vanished, the media reported on a fight between Diana and her mother that had occurred just days before. The press claimed that Diana had a nervous breakdown and needed medical attention. Her sister Valeria was also hospitalized with similar symptoms. To avoid conflict, the court awarded custody of Valeria to her father. The decision was made as a precaution due to the stress of Diana's disappearance. The father and Valeria left town, sparking rumors that the family was hiding something. Diana's friends revealed that running away from home was not unusual for her sisters, especially 16 years old, Valeria. The family dynamics were complex, and arguments between the mother and daughters were common. This information raises a question: if Diana regularly left the house without any problems, why was her mother so worried this time? On August 31st, Diana's parents failed to appear for a press conference, where they were expected to provide an update on the investigation into their daughter's disappearance. According to the family's lawyer, her parents were too distraught to attend, as they were struggling to accept the possibility of never seeing Diana again. An article published in El Mundo on September 11th revealed new information about the family's situation. Contrary to the mother's claims that Diana did not have mental health issues. It was reported that Diana had previously gone missing for 3 days in April. During this time, she had turned off her phone and told her mother that she no longer wanted to live with her. The mother had not contacted the police, which raised concerns about her response to her daughter's behavior. Letters exchanged between Diana and her younger sister Valeria were also made public, shedding light on the emotional struggles both girls were facing. Valeria had been hospitalized multiple times in the past year, including one instance where she had to have her stomach pumped due to an overdose of prescription medication. Prosecutors have launched a new investigation into the alleged abuse of Valeria, the youngest daughter of the family, due to the lack of progress in the case of Diana's disappearance. The investigation into Diana's disappearance is currently in progress and is moving forward quickly. Forensic experts have analyzed several items belonging to Diana, including her toothbrush, comb, computer, diary, and prescription medication. Investigators have also questioned her acquaintances, including a young Moroccan man she had a brief relationship with. Unfortunately, these efforts yielded no results and police searches remained unsuccessful. The police have conducted extensive searches in the surrounding mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes. However, It appears that Diana disappeared at around 3 a.m., and the last signal from her phone was detected in the Tarragone area, 13 miles from her family's location. 72 days after her disappearance, Diana's case remains unresolved. However, police have found the hairband and a cell phone matching the description of Diana's phone. Her father has confirmed that the phone belongs to his daughter. 2 months after Diana went missing, her Facebook profile suddenly became active again. Her friends and family quickly informed the police and provided screenshots. It appeared that the "Remind Password" feature had been used, allowing someone to access her account without knowing her login details. This led to 2 possible explanations: either Diana had forgotten her password and was trying to regain access, or someone else was attempting to break into her account. Diana's phone was a key element in the case, but it did not provide any useful information that could help explain her disappearance. The investigation finally made progress on November 10, 2006, when the driver of the car in which Diana was last seen was identified. The driver had a history of being involved in human trafficking, but this information was kept confidential to avoid jeopardizing the investigation. Initially, he had an alibi for the night of Diana's disappearance, as his wife claimed he was with her, which temporarily cleared him as a suspect. On December 25, 2017, a new piece of information came to light that greatly helped the investigation. A girl was attacked by a man who demanded her phone and threatened her with a weapon. She screamed, and a passing couple intervened, saving her from the assailant who attempted to drag her into his car. The traumatized girl quickly contacted the police, providing a description of the attacker and his vehicle's license plate number. The next day, the police arrested 41-year-old Jose Enrique Abuengay, who had a previous criminal record. Significantly, Jose Enrique was the same individual who had been detained in 2016 on suspicion of kidnapping Diana but was released due to an alibi provided by his wife. Police re-questioned Jose Enrique and his wife. Following the interrogation, the wife admitted that her initial alibi had been false, and in reality, Jose Enrique was away from their home on the night Diana disappeared and did not return until 4 a.m. Jose Enrique initially claimed that he had accidentally hit Diana with his car and, fearing discovery and imprisonment, he had dumped her body. However, he later changed his story, confessing to kidnapping and murdering her. According to Jose Enrique's new testimony, he went to the beach to look for gasoline from abandoned cars, and that's where he met Diana. The confession of Jose Enrique reveals shocking and disturbing information. He kidnapped Diana, attempted to force her into a sexual act, and ultimately strangled her. This shocking confession sheds light on the case, confirming that Diana's disappearance was a heinous crime. The disappearance of Diana Maria Kaur Lopez Pinal has been a traumatic and lengthy case for her family and those following her case. The investigation lasted 494 days, and was heavily covered by the media, with many unfounded and damaging rumors about her parents, causing them great distress and making the investigation more difficult. Despite these challenges, investigators persisted and eventually gathered enough evidence to identify the perpetrator. Diana's loved ones remember her as a beautiful, energetic young woman whose short life was unfortunately ended after an encounter with a violent man. Although Jose Enrique initially withheld information about Diana's whereabouts, he eventually revealed the location of her body, allowing her family and friends to hold a proper burial in January 2018. Her body was discovered in the well of an abandoned warehouse. The perpetrator, Jose Enrique, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat, the case of John Thomas Maguire. Amanda and Anna Marie McClure were 2 sisters who lived in an orphanage. Living in an orphanage can be extremely challenging. You don't have a place of your own or time to yourself, and if you're unable to stand up for yourself, you're at risk of being bullied by kids who have been there longer. Typically, Bullies target children who are loners. Sisters Amanda and Anna Marie McClure were luckier than most because they can always protect each other. They feel comfortable being around each other and don't try to make friends with anyone. Unfortunately for Anna Marie and Anna Marie, their family secret is about to be revealed. Their father, Larry, has been convicted and imprisoned, and this news has been widely broadcast on television by various news sources. One day, the McClure sisters, Amanda and Anna Marie, helped a new girl named Meredith who was being bullied. Meredith had been living with her mother, who was addicted to drugs. After her mother's death from an overdose, Meredith was too afraid to call for help and stayed with her mother's body for a few days. It wasn't until a friend visited and found her mother's body that emergency services were called. Meredith soon became friends with the McClure sisters, and the three of them had a lot of fun together. Amanda and Anna Marie never told anyone why they were living in an orphanage. And when Meredith asked, Anna Marie made up a story about their father being a police officer who died while on duty to catch a dangerous criminal. Meredith was so impressed with Anna Marie's story that she told it to the other children at the camp. Overnight, the McClure sisters became heroes and were admired by everyone. Most of the kids in the shelter had parents who had died from substance abuse or were in prison, so the McClure sisters' story made them stand out in a positive way. The sisters' secluded life at the orphanage came to an end when all the children wanted to befriend them. However, this marked the beginning of a difficult period in their lives. A heartbreaking truth comes to light: their father, presumed dead, is actually alive and serving a prison sentence for violence and sex crimes he committed against minors. The sisters' lives became a nightmare. However, they got a second chance when two different families decided to adopt them. This meant they would be living apart, and their bond was eventually broken. Amanda, who had previously worried her adoptive parents. They were worried that she would be single forever, and that not having a biological family had a profound effect on her mental health. Amanda's adoptive parents were relieved to learn that she was in a serious relationship with a man named John Thomas McGuire, who was 38 years old. This would be his second marriage, and he had 2 sons from a previous marriage. What reassured them even more was that John seemed to be a perfect partner and always supported her. He also had a friendly relationship with his ex-wife, which was a good sign for Amanda's future with him. After serving his sentence, Larry McClure was pardoned and settled in Virginia. His first priority was to find his daughters. He went straight to Amanda's foster parents, Glenn and Alex, said hello and introduced himself. He asked to see Amanda and requested her contact information, including her address and phone number. Although Larry appeared disheveled and intimidating, with deep wrinkles and dark circles under his eyes, he didn't seem intoxicated. However, his behavior was not quite right. Glenn, Amanda's foster parent, refused Larry's request but promised to inform Amanda that her biological father was looking for her. Larry was taken aback by the term biological father, but he thanked Glenn and left. Glenn did keep his promise. He told Amanda that her father was free and was looking for her. Amanda was torn, with a part of her wanting to reject her father, given his past mistakes, and another part wanting to give him another chance. Amanda reaches out to her father, Larry, after many years of separation. Amanda initiates the conversation by calling her father, who is overjoyed to hear from her. Larry asks about her well-being, and she shares that she's doing well, married, and happy. Larry was very happy for his daughter and invited her and her husband to have dinner with him. Amanda is initially uncertain about meeting her father, but he senses her hesitation and reassures her by telling her to forget the old grudges, and he has lived all these years with only one thought: to see her and Marie. This suggests that Larry has been thinking about his daughters and wants to see them again. Larry's meetings with Amanda and John led to their introduction to the world of illegal substances, which he manufactured himself in his camper. Initially, their financial situation was stable, but Larry manipulated them into funding his substance production. As their addiction deepened, they both lost their jobs. Larry persuaded John to register as a drug addict to receive $180 in state assistance. However, this amount was insufficient to support their habit, and Larry continued to exploit them for money. Meanwhile, Larry met Anna Marie and repeated the same pattern, getting her hooked on substances and taking her money. Amanda and John's situation spiraled out of control. They accumulated huge debts, lost their house, and were forced to move into Larry's camper. John's parents, who were unaware of the situation, were told that they was going on a trip together. In reality, Amanda and John had become entrenched in a cycle of substance abuse and alcohol consumption with Larry, and John's parents have never heard from their son since. On Valentine's Day, John, still reeling from the effects of substance abuse, planned a romantic evening for his wife Amanda at the family circle. He cooked a fancy dinner, inviting Larry and Anna Marie to join them. However, under the prolonged influence of the drugs, a disturbing situation unfolded. Amanda and Larry, who were supposed to be father and daughter, began to develop an inappropriately close relationship. Sadly, John was unaware of this, and as a result, he became redundant in their twisted relationship. During the meal, John spoke very many warm words to Amanda, which made Larry extremely anxious. As the tension increased, Larry interrupted John's speech and asked if he could be completely honest with his wife. John agreed, and Larry suggested a game. They tied John's legs and instructed him to answer truthfully about his life. Initially, the questions covering topics like childhood and school. However, under the influence of drugs, Larry began to accuse John of being an undercover FBI agent. When John denied this, they hit him. Although John begging for mercy, but he was ultimately struck on the head with a bottle of wine, the same wine he had brought for the family dinner. Over the course of 2 days, Larry, Amanda, and Anna Marie subjected John to torture while using illegal substances. When they thought it was time to end things, Amanda put a black bag over John's head and tightened it around his neck until he stopped breathing. They buried John in the backyard and then celebrated the engagement of Larry and Amanda, father and daughter, with more drugs and alcohol. On the 3rd day, their mental health worsened. They began to hallucinate, seeing John's ghost, hearing police sirens, and imagining that the ground where they buried John was disturbed as if he might escape and report everything to the authorities. The situation was chaotic, but the father and daughters still decided to take more drastic action. They dug up John's body, checked his pulse, and examined his pupils' reaction to light, even though he showed clear signs of decomposition. This, however, did not convince them that he was truly gone. In a frantic bid to prevent John from coming back to life, they dismembered his body with a wood axe and drove aspen stakes into each piece. They then buried the remains in different locations and covered them with lime to accelerate the decomposition process. 3 weeks later, Larry and Amanda got married. To conceal their relationship, Larry changed his name. The new family aimed to start afresh, moving to Kentucky. They promised each other to stop using illegal substances for good. To avoid suspicion, they even hung an American flag over their front door, just like their neighbors did. By this time, John's ex-wife and parents were becoming increasingly concerned about his lack of contact. In 2019, John's mother even filed a police report regarding his disappearance. Meanwhile, Larry failed to inform the police about his move to another state, which violated his probation terms and led to his return to prison. Larry's mental state deteriorated, especially after long-term substance abuse and alcohol use. This sent him into rehab, leading to anxiety and confusion between what was real and what wasn't, reflected in his disturbing behavior. Larry suspected that the parole violation was merely a pretext for authorities to search his backyard for John's remains. He felt an urgent need to contact Amanda or Anna Marie and instruct them to dig up the body parts and rebury them far from their home. Since all prisoner calls are monitored, he had to find a discreet way to communicate this information. Larry meticulously prepared a speech to convey his message, but ultimately, he was denied the opportunity to make calls. Unable to cope with the situation any longer, he decided to confess to the police. Larry thought that if he confessed to the murder before being charged, he might avoid the death penalty. He even considered blaming his daughters to make his situation better. However, the police officer did not believe him. First of all, what murder? What body parts were buried in the backyard? What crazy idea did this man have? Legally, they had to verify his claims. Initially, the police planned to conduct an investigation. They took his statement, and they found out that John was indeed missing. A police unit was sent to Larry's house. First on the scene, investigators found evidence that Larry had mentioned, confirming all of the criminal's statements. The McClure sisters were quickly apprehended. Amanda and Anna Marie were in shock, unable to believe that their father and stepfather could confess to such a brutal murder. They were even more stunned to learn that Larry was trying to portray himself as an innocent bystander, claiming in his testimony that it was his daughters who killed John, and he was just unwittingly involved in the crime. As the investigation unfolded, each the family McClure member sought to protect themselves and convinced the police that their involvement was purely accidental. This situation was particularly difficult for John's relatives because there was no body, only remains were found. Those remains had to be carefully collected by forensic experts, transported to his parents, and ultimately buried in a closed coffin. It has been mentioned many that John was a kind person. Despite the challenges they faced, his parents were able to arrange for his burial. Some friends contributed financially, while others assisted with transportation and funeral planning. John was laid to rest at a Lutheran church on October 25, 2019. On February 15, the day after Valentine's Day, a member of the McClure family posted on Facebook, claiming it was a message from John. The post stated that he was going on a long trip and would be out of touch, asking friends not to worry about his absence. This raised suspicions that the family McClure had planned to kill John, and they wanted to deceive others to avoid causing panic. Despite the severity of the crime, but during the trial, Larry and Amanda received an additional 6 months in their sentence due to their illegal father-daughter marriage, which is prohibited in the state. The trial began, and Larry testified. He revealed that he had always felt remorse for his children throughout his life. He explained that when they were very young, he committed a serious crime that led to them being placed in an orphanage. Their birth mother had abandoned them, and he was the only one left feeling heartbroken. Larry expressed deep gratitude towards the families who adopted his children, mentioning that he had even prayed for their adoptive parents in churches. He desperately wanted to make up for the years gone by with them and admitted that this might be why he made the choices he did. He describes John as a wonderful young man and expresses his grief for him. He says that if he could change the past, he would, but emphasizes that no one can bring the dead back to life. He mentions his deep love for his daughter Amanda. However, he notes that Amanda does not care about John. Her only concern is taking money from his account. He questions whether anyone would consider killing someone for $180, and that people should recognize Amanda for what she was. He called her a monster, not a human. He stated that he, Amanda and Marie, were addicted to drugs and that they deserved to be punished for their actions. He expressed his desire to speak to the jury and said that regardless of his sentence, he was aware of his health problems and believed that he might not live more than 10 years. He expressed regret for John's passing and again apologized to all of John's loved ones. The trial dragged on because the defendants kept changing their statements about whether they killed John or not. Amanda, unable to bear the long trial, made a deal with investigators. In return, she was assured that she would be charged with involuntary manslaughter at her next trial. Larry then gave another speech. He said, "The four of us bought the ingredients to make illegal drugs. Amanda came to me and shared her wish to get revenge on John. The reality is that John, while high on drugs, assaulted Anna Marie, which led to her becoming pregnant. For me, I needed to regain my daughter's trust after years apart. I felt I could not refuse their demands. I often blamed myself for what had happened and thought about ending my life. But I wondered, why should I suffer when this crime was committed by them?" After Larry's speech, it was John's family's turn to speak. John's mother cried uncontrollably and could not express her emotions. She expressed, "Even if one day I can forgive the McClure family, I will never forget what they did. I also hope I live long enough to see one of them die before me." Next, John's children spoke, cursing the killers and declaring that they would never forgive them. The judge delivered the final verdict, sentencing Larry McClure to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the sentence for Amanda was revealed, her adoptive parents regretted telling her that her biological father was looking for her. They had always raised her with the freedom to make her own choices, unaware that this freedom could lead to such dire consequences. At the time the verdict was announced, Amanda stated that her father's jealousy was the root cause of the situation. Her adoptive parents pleaded with the judge to consider that Amanda's involvement in the crime was heavily influenced by Larry's negative impact, asserting that she would never have committed such a violent act otherwise. However, the prosecutors argued that the murder was a planned act, suggesting that Amanda and Larry were conspiring to be together as a couple. The initial hearing focused on Amanda, who was sentenced to 40 years. The judge said Amanda could serve only 20 years. During Anna Marie's sentencing, she attempted to speak out against John's murder. However, she felt pressured by her father and sister to do what they wanted, and she only attended Larry and Amanda's wedding out of concern for her own future. Ultimately, Anna Marie was sentenced to 40 years. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Cassandra Cantrell. Cassandra and Robert were twins. As children, Cassandra and Robert liked to tell each other scary stories in a room with the lights off. Robert was a talented storyteller. Cassandra always found Robert's stories interesting. In every story, Robert played a small but brave man. In addition, Cassandra and Robert also watched the animated series Scooby-Doo together. Although their mother, Mary Smith, did not share Cassandra's passion to instill in her children a love of reading, she bought them many books about scary stories. Loving horror stories was the passion of the two siblings. They even collected figurines of villains and, as adults, seriously considered opening a horror-themed bookstore. Not long after, Cassandra's interest in horror movies brought her to the studio in 2004. She got a cameo role in a scary movie that, although it did not become popular, still made Robert envious of Cassandra. Robert began asking Cassandra to make him a deal. Robert asked Cassandra to give him a role in the movie she was filming. Cassandra readily agreed. Robert was happy, but he couldn't play even a supporting role in a soap opera. The head of the cast in that movie was Colin Dudley, who had a crush on Cassandra since her first days in the movie. At the company Halloween party, Cassandra dressed as Velma from Scooby-Doo and Colin dressed as Alex from A Clockwork Orange. During the party, Colin walked around with a glass of milk all evening, glaring at everyone, just like his character did in the movie, and he also said a lot of quotes from the book. Finally, he stopped in front of Cassandra and said that her beauty made Colin want to destroy it. Cassandra thought it was a compliment and they quickly started dating. But their relationship didn't last long, only a few months. Colin found another actress named Rebecca and began dating her, after which Colin and Rebecca began living together. One day, on August 25, 2020, Cassandra Connell suddenly disappeared. When her mother, Mary Smith, tried to contact her, she did not answer the phone. Mary went to report the incident to the police, and a search was quickly launched. After several days of searching, police found her car under the bridge. Also, the bad news was that the car was unlocked and the keys were still inside. There was no reason for Cassandra to appear here. This place was considered a homeless shelter where violence often occurred. Officers had to go through the neighborhood questioning many homeless people. But none of them had ever seen Cassandra, and none of them knew when the car appeared here. The detective participating in the search for Cassandra requested to locate Cassandra's cell phone. The signal showed the phone was in the water closest to the bridge, which meant detectives wouldn't be able to recover it and couldn't get the information they needed. To search more closely, a team of divers was about to search the coastal area for Cassandra. Before starting, they stood on the shore, picked up rocks, and threw them into the water to gauge the distance they could throw. Cassandra's mother mentioned that Cassandra's phone case had rhinestones, making it easy to spot. The phone was soon found, but Cassandra's body was not. Mary expressed her grief, saying she had looked forward to being a grandmother soon and hadn't even had time to set up a crib for her expected grandchild, which was still in its box in the garage. She wondered what to do with it now, unknowingly providing important information for the investigation. According to statistics, many crimes against pregnant women are committed by their partners. However, Mary Smith did not know who Cassandra's boyfriend was. Cassandra was not married and didn't seem to be in a relationship, yet she was pregnant. Mary had no information about him, despite knowing that Cassandra often spoke to someone on the phone. However, the phone number was not saved in Cassandra's phone book, and Mary couldn't recall the number. It's common for girls to confide in at least one friend about their relationships, especially when it comes to something as significant as pregnancy. The police found such a friend, who revealed that Cassandra had reconnected with her ex-boyfriend, Colin Dudley. They had a brief relationship in 2004, but it was surprising that they rekindled their romance 15 years after breaking up. When Cassandra discovered she had been pregnant, she had hesitated to inform Colin. She had recalled an earlier conversation where he had expressed his disdain for having children, even expressing relief that his wife Rebecca had been infertile. Fearing a child would disrupt her relationship with Colin, Cassandra had kept her secret hidden. However, as her pregnancy had progressed, it had become more and more difficult to hide underneath the oversized clothes. To avoid arousing suspicion, Cassandra had stopped seeing Colin, even though she had known she couldn't keep the truth hidden forever. Cassandra decided it had been best to be honest with Colin. So she had told him over the phone that she had been pregnant with his child. Colin had been silent for a moment before replying that he had been happy about the news. Although his tone had seemed a bit off, Cassandra had believed he had truly felt happy. A detective visited Colin's house and knocked on the door. However, the person who had opened the door had been Rebecca, a detective who introduced herself as Colin's old friend and had asked to meet Colin. Without hesitation, Colin had stepped out from behind Rebecca, closed the door behind him, and walked out of the house with the detective. It had seemed like Colin had been expecting this conversation, even though the detective had yet to formally introduce himself. Colin told the detective that he appreciated the detectives for not revealing any information in front of Rebecca. Colin mentioned that he had heard about Cassandra's disappearance and found it strange, and said that he didn't know where she had gone. He explained that Cassandra had told him about a big argument with her brother, Robert. Colin had advised Cassandra to reconcile with Robert but was unsure whether she would take his advice. The detective already knew about the fight between Cassandra and Robert, as Colin had explained to the detective that it had been just a small family misunderstanding, even though Robert had been extremely upset about it. On the day she disappeared, Cassandra had called Colin and said she wanted to talk, but he had refused because of his ego. Now, Colin blamed himself for her disappearance, believing that if he had met her that day, she might not have disappeared. Colin admitted to the detective that he had not been the nicest person, that he had been secretly dating Cassandra behind Rebecca's back for a long time, and expressed his belief that he would probably be punished for it in the other world. Colin also shared that when his father had passed away in 2014, he had a deep hatred for Rebecca. Rebecca often clashed with her father Colin, accusing him of not understanding her. However, sometimes it turned out that it was actually Rebecca who didn't understand her father. After Colin's father had passed away, Colin had wanted to fulfill one of his wishes. His father had been right about some things, and Colin decided to rekindle his relationship with Cassandra. This meant Colin had to end things with Rebecca. Therefore, for 5 years, Colin had lived a double life, which was extremely difficult. Colin constantly made excuses to come home late, telling Rebecca about fake business trips. Colin even bought a fishing rod even though he didn't like fishing. Colin would tell Rebecca that he was going to the lake when in reality he was visiting Cassandra. To make his lie more believable, he bought fish from the supermarket and Rebecca would cook it, despite the fact that the smell of fish made him sick. Things took a surprising turn when Colin discovered that Cassandra was pregnant. Colin did not know who the father was, but Cassandra had confided in a close friend that it was Colin. Colin found this hard to believe. She wanted to have a family of her own with Colin, but this was something Colin could not provide for her. Colin assumed she had found someone else, and he assumed that was why Cassandra didn't want to see him anymore. The detective asked Colin when was the last time he had seen her. Colin honestly replied that he didn't remember, but it was probably about 3 or 4 months ago. Colin said that he had run into Cassandra at the mall, but only briefly because Rebecca was trying on clothes, and he had gotten tired of waiting so he walked to the coffee shop. Colin asked the police officer one last time if they had any chance of finding Cassandra alive. The detective replied that they were doing everything they could and asked Colin to believe him. This was not the last time Colin saw the detective. Although Cassandra's phone was unusable, police had obtained her call records. It turned out that the person Cassandra had been calling frequently was Colin Dudley. Cassandra had called him often, even on the day she went missing. Police also received CCTV footage from the railway station near where Cassandra's abandoned car was found. The video showed a suspicious man standing out among passengers on the platform. He was wearing a long coat, gloves, and a scarf covering his face. A wide-brimmed hat obscured his eyes, making it impossible for police to see his face clearly. However, the detective noted that the man's gait reminded him of Colin Dudley. The hat was similar to the one Colin had worn at the party playing a character in the movie A Clockwork Orange. After tracking the suspect via CCTV, detectives observed him briefly entering a coffee shop, only to leave a few minutes later and head towards the parking lot. There, he got into his car and drove away. Even though his face was obscured the entire time, detectives were still able to write down the license plate number. A search warrant was then issued and a unit was dispatched to Colin Dudley's residence. During the search of Colin's home, detectives hoped that Cassandra was still alive. At first, there was no evidence of a murder at Colin's house. However, in the wardrobe they find the hat that Colin had tried to hide. They then found a basement in his house. When the police went to the basement, they did not find Cassandra there and there was no evidence of a crime. However, the dog detected the smell of blood, became agitated and barked continuously. Colin insisted he did nothing illegal, claiming that the police had no evidence and no other suspects, so they were trying to frame him, and he claimed to be an innocent man. In search of more information, detectives interviewed Rebecca, who was shocked by the surprise search, the allegations against her husband, and the fact that she had been deceived for years. She said many things about Colin and her feelings, but when the detective asked if her husband was capable of murder, she thought for a long time and then answered no. The evidence against Colin was not enough to send him to prison, which angered Robert and Mary Smith. Later, Colin was called in again for questioning. This time, Colin claimed that he had an alibi to counter the charges against him. He said that at 6:30 a.m. on August 25th, he went to a hardware store and bought household cleaning chemicals and trash bags. The store's cameras confirmed this, but the purchase of large trash bags raised suspicions. In addition, Colin received a text message from Cassandra, saying that Cassandra was coming to his house. Colin immediately deleted the message, but it was still stored in the mobile carrier's memory. The police took it from calls and text messages. According to cell phone signals, Colin and Cassandra had not left the house for several hours that morning. Colin turned off his phone but left Cassandra's phone on, possibly accidentally. As a result, police were able to track his movements, including where he was seen on the station's CCTV cameras. Police suspect Colin may have used the cafe to clean up after the murder and wash up in the toilet. Colin drove to where he had discarded Cassandra's phone, which was the last location of Cassandra's cell phone signal. The police need to find Cassandra's body and seize the GPS tracking device on Colin's car to accurately track his route. This device provided new evidence in the case. Following Colin's trail the previous day, the police discovered a large trash can tied with a rope in a ravine in the forest. The ground around the bag was covered in blood, and it was clear to see what was inside. The case happened a month ago, so identifying the body was difficult. However, police were able to identify Cassandra's body thanks to a tattoo described in the search notes. Colin was arrested the same day and charged with murder. Forensic examination revealed that Cassandra's death was caused by a fractured skull due to blunt force trauma. During the trial, the police presented Colin Dudley's motive for committing the crime. However, due to a lack of witnesses and physical evidence, including the murder weapon, it was impossible to convince the jury that Colin was guilty. To resolve the case, the court offered Colin a plea deal stating that if he pleaded guilty, he would receive a reduced sentence. Colin accepted the deal and was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Cassandra's mother and brother were deeply saddened by the outcome, as they still grappled with feelings of guilt for not having met Cassandra before her death. They are especially worried about the fact that Colin may one day be released from prison, free to live the rest of his life regardless of the crimes he has committed against their family. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Crystal Perry. Crystal Perry had been born on August 23, 1963, in Rumford, Maine, the youngest of 10 children. Her parents had faced significant difficulties providing for their large family, leading Crystal and her siblings to grow up independent. Crystal and her siblings had always wanted to build their own lives as soon as possible. They eventually moved to different cities and states in search of new opportunities. Crystal had met her future husband Tom in high school. Crystal and Tom married and initially moved to California, but Crystal soon discovered that life in the city was not right for her. After a year and a half, they decided to return to Maine, settling in the small town of Bridgeton, about an hour from Crystal's hometown of Rumford. Crystal found a job at a local shoe store, while Tom worked various odd jobs. Crystal and Tom's lives took a new turn when Crystal became pregnant and they welcomed daughter Sarah. Although Tom was initially excited to become a father, Sarah's arrival complicated Tom's relationship with Crystal. Tom began spending more and more time at a local bar, spending almost all of their limited income on alcohol. One time, he even took the money Crystal had saved to buy alcohol, leaving them with almost nothing. As Tom's drinking habits worsened, the family did not have enough money for basic needs, including food. Finally, Crystal decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, Tom occasionally saw Sarah, but he was largely absent from her life. The situation got worse when Tom got a new girlfriend and she started harassing Crystal. This girlfriend would call Crystal, make threats, come to her house, and cause provocations, all because she was upset with Crystal's past relationship with Tom. Crystal's fears for Sarah's safety grew and she became hesitant to let her daughter visit Tom, worried that Tom's new girlfriend might actually harm Sarah. Crystal moved in with her mother and worked hard to save enough money to buy her own house. After years of saving, she bought a small house near a peaceful lake on the outskirts of Bridgeton. Crystal was excited to provide a stable and loving environment for her daughter, Sarah. Crystal prioritized giving Sarah the attention and love she deserved. In their free time, Crystal and Sarah enjoyed spending quality time together, often watching movies or chatting with each other. One day was like any other day. Crystal went to work, and Sarah went to school. They had their usual dinner together, and Crystal carried Sarah to bed. However, a few hours later, Sarah's peaceful night was broken by a loud scream that startled her. At first, she thought Crystal was arguing on the phone, but it quickly became clear that there was something much more serious going on with Crystal. Crystal had been screaming loudly in the kitchen, causing Sarah to fear that her mother was being attacked. The bedroom door had been slightly open, but the kitchen was out of sight. Stiff with fear, Sarah could not move or make a sound. As she listened, she heard footsteps approaching, making her think that the next attacker would come for her. Feeling scared, she quickly hid behind the bed. However, the footsteps stopped, and Sarah heard the sound of a kitchen drawer opening, followed by the clatter of someone rummaging through utensils. Crystal's screams continued, filled with pleas for mercy, until she was stabbed. With each stab, Crystal's voice grew weaker. Sarah realized she could do nothing and would likely be killed as well. After her mother's screams stopped, she left the room and went into the kitchen, where she witnessed a terrible scene. Her mother lay in a large pool of blood covering the floor. Confused, Sarah asked her neighbors for help and eventually found an Italian restaurant whose owner lived in an adjacent building. They opened the door for Sarah and called 911 to report the incident. The officers immediately went to their home. Upon arrival, officers witnessed a gruesome scene. The kitchen was covered in blood, including the floors, walls, and kitchen appliances. Crystal had died, and medical experts determined that Crystal had lost too much blood. Police found a handprint on the front door glass, possibly Sarah's. No other fingerprints were found, but there were many bloody shoe prints on the kitchen floor. Investigators took photos to determine the shoe size and model, assuming they belonged to the killer. A trail of blood led to Sarah's bedroom but suddenly stopped as if the killer had changed his mind. One particular detail caught the detective's attention. The killer had tried to wipe away some blood on the floor. With the blood stains spreading, this effort seemed futile. Further investigation revealed that some of the drops of blood on the floor were irregularly shaped, suggesting they had fallen from the knife. This led investigators to believe that drops of blood might have flown out of the knife during the attack. Investigations showed that, in addition to the initial drops of blood, other drops of blood on the floor appeared to have fallen at a 90-degree angle, suggesting they originated from a higher point. Detectives suspected these drops might belong to the perpetrator, who might have been injured during the crime. Further supporting this theory, the trail of blood drops led directly to a roll of tissue. This showed that the perpetrator used a tissue to stop the bleeding before hastily leaving the scene. Autopsy results showed that Crystal's body had suffered more than 50 stab wounds. The murder weapon, possibly a kitchen knife, was not found at the crime scene, suggesting the perpetrator might have brought it with him. An important detail revealed that the force used was so great that part of the knife broke and was stuck in Crystal's body. The investigation also found evidence of a previous sexual assault. As a result, medical experts were able to collect and analyze the perpetrator's semen along with the blood samples obtained, sending both for further laboratory testing. However, there was a problem. The local DNA laboratory was severely understaffed due to funding problems, leading to a significant backlog. As a result, detectives had to begin the investigation without forensic evidence, which would take at least 6 months to process. The investigation began by ruling out robbery as a motive because nothing was missing from the house. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry, so the police suspected that the victim had arbitrarily opened the door to let the perpetrator in. Since she was wearing pajamas, it was unlikely that she was expecting visitors. Detectives came up with 2 theories. Either the victim knew her killer, or someone she didn't know knocked on her door and convinced her to let them in under false pretenses. To pursue this lead, detectives turned their attention to the only witness, Sarah, who was undergoing a medical examination at the hospital. The police began questioning Sarah about the killer, and she explained that she had stayed in the bedroom until the incident was over. However, the police were a bit skeptical about her story. They asked her how she knew her mother had been attacked with a knife, and Sarah replied that it was obvious. Despite her reaction, detectives continued to pressure her, suspecting that she might have been withholding information and might have seen the perpetrator. During the first 3 days after the murder, police questioned Sarah 18 times in the hope that her story would change. However, she always maintained that everything happened as she initially described. Meanwhile, detectives pursued other leads and achieved their first breakthrough. They discovered a pair of boots at a local shoe store whose sole pattern resembled bloody footprints found at the crime scene. Additionally, they learned that Crystal had been harassed by Teresa, Crystal's ex-husband's girlfriend. Despite evidence that the killer was a man, the police decided to investigate Teresa, considering her history of threatening to kill Crystal. Maybe Teresa had found an accomplice to commit the crime. However, detectives found no evidence to support this theory. Further investigation revealed that Crystal was in a relationship with a man named Dennis at the time of her death. The two had met 2 years ago when Dennis started working at the shoe store. Dennis and Crystal began dating, and Dennis eventually proposed to her. Although Crystal accepted, they never married. Their relationship was tense, with frequent arguments and Dennis engaging in aggressive behavior, such as breaking objects and banging on walls. However, there was no evidence that he ever physically harmed Crystal. The day after Crystal's murder, detectives visited Dennis at his home. When they asked if he had left the house the night before or if he had seen Crystal, Dennis immediately asked if she was dead and then fainted. After regaining consciousness, he answered the detectives' questions. Dennis explained that he had planned to visit Crystal that evening but was delayed because he was helping a friend fix his car. When he later called Crystal, she said it was too late, leading to an argument and Dennis staying home. Police were able to verify Dennis' alibi, confirming that he had helped his friend that evening. Dennis also agreed to take a polygraph test, which showed no signs of deception, except when asked if he felt responsible for Crystal's death. He replied no, but the test detected his tremors. Additionally, detectives discovered that Dennis had the same shoe size as the killer, but no matching shoes were found in his house. Dennis agreed to provide a DNA sample but made a special request. Dennis had made a special request to the detectives. If they decided to arrest him, he had asked them to enter his workplace through the back door, instead of the main entrance. He had explained that he did not want to disrupt the work environment or make noise in front of his colleagues because his boss had always treated him kindly. However, because he had continued to claim innocence, this request had raised suspicions. The police investigation had led to another important discovery. They had contacted Crystal's best friend, who lived in another town, and she had revealed that Crystal had confided in her just weeks before the murder. Crystal had expressed her fear towards Dennis, saying their arguments had escalated and had become more and more heated. Dennis' behavior had also become more and more aggressive, causing Crystal to consider ending their relationship. However, she had hesitated to do so because she was afraid of his reaction. Detectives had also interviewed one of Crystal's co-workers, but she had not provided any useful information during their conversation. However, as soon as the police had left, Dennis had gone to the person's workplace and had begun asking about her conversation with the detectives. The police investigation had continued despite the lack of evidence against the initial suspect, as DNA test results would have taken several months to process. Meanwhile, they had pursued other leads. A strange tip had led them to a local man named Donnie, who had allegedly bragged about killing Crystal while drunk at a party. However, when questioned, Donnie had claimed to have no memory of the party and had denied any involvement in the murder. The police investigation into Crystal's murder had had difficulty finding any concrete clues. In an effort to uncover new information, Crystal's family had offered a $10,000 reward and had distributed flyers around town. However, Teresa, Crystal's ex-husband's girlfriend, had been seen repeatedly tearing up these flyers, raising suspicions. The ex-husband, Tom, had been thoroughly investigated but had eventually been ruled out as a suspect due to his severe alcoholism. His heavy daily drinking had made it unlikely he would commit a crime, and he had had no clear motive. Police had also investigated two other men Crystal had dated after her divorce but had found no evidence linking them to the crime. All three men, including Tom, had provided DNA samples to be sent to a laboratory for analysis. 9 months after the murder, the lab results had finally come in, but they hadn't matched any of the suspects, including Dennis. This had left detectives with no new leads. They had asked to take Dennis's DNA sample again for further testing, but the results had still been the same. The investigation into Crystal's murder had hit a dead end, causing detectives to reinvestigate their only witness, Sarah. They had suspected that Sarah might be hiding information or that a traumatic experience had caused her to repress memories of the killer. To question her further, police had gone to Texas, where Sarah was living with her aunt. A polygraph test had been administered to Sarah, but the results hadn't shown any deception. Despite this, investigators had continued to question her for days, asking the same questions over and over again. However, Sarah had always maintained that she had not seen the killer. The case had remained unsolved for several years. Police had continued to interview potential suspects and follow up on leads. But to no avail. The breakthrough had come in the late 1990s with the introduction of the FBI's DNA database. Investigators had uploaded the killer's DNA sample, but unfortunately, no matches had been found. The detective asked Sarah to work with a psychologist to try to recall any repressed memories of the crime. Even though Sarah agreed, the psychologist ultimately concluded that she really didn't remember anything and was telling the truth about not seeing the killer. The case remained unsolved for many years. Detectives continued to investigate but found no new leads. This changed in 2006 when a surprising development occurred. A DNA sample was entered into the FBI database and it matched blood and semen left at the crime scene where Crystal was killed. The DNA belonged to a man named Michael Hutchinson, who was never suspected in the case. Detectives discovered that in 2003, Hutchinson was arrested for assault and threatening with a weapon, resulting in a sentence of 6 months in prison and 3 years of probation. During his arrest, a DNA sample was collected, but it was not uploaded to the FBI database at the time. It was instead stored in a laboratory. 3 years after the initial DNA sample was taken, Michael was arrested for drunk driving with his children. He was released on bail but failed to appear in court, leading to jail time. Ironically, Michael was arrested on the day of the wedding and put in a prison cell. His DNA sample was retrieved and quickly uploaded to the database. The detective contacted Sarah, informing her of the development but asked her to keep the information confidential until formal charges were filed. When asked if she knew the suspect, Sarah replied that she did not. Given that Michael was already in custody, the detective carefully built the case to prevent any possibility of him evading punishment. Further investigation revealed that at the time of the murder, Michael lived in Bridgeton, just 2 miles from Crystal's residence. When he was 19, Michael lived near the Italian restaurant where Sarah called the police. He regularly drove to his mother's house, which was just a short distance from Crystal's, meaning he often passed by her residence. The detective discovered that Michael could have easily encountered Crystal multiple times before the murder. When questioned in prison, Michael insisted he was not involved in Crystal's murder and denied knowing her, despite the presence of his semen and blood on her body at the crime scene. The detective found his denial unconvincing. During the visit to the prison, the detective observed a noticeable scar on Michael's palm. This was very significant because it was likely that Crystal's killer injured his hand during the crime. While this alone would not have been enough evidence in court, combined with DNA evidence, it contributed to Michael's eventual murder charge. According to the prosecution, Michael, an illegal drug user, saw Crystal as he passed her house on the night of the murder. He decided to assault her, leading to her death. While Michael refused to confess, the available evidence clearly showed that he was responsible for the assault and murder of Crystal. During the trial, an explanation was found for the murderer's lack of fingerprints at the crime scene. It turned out that Michael's job as a bricklayer was the reason. Over time, the constant wear and tear on his hands had erased the patterns on his palms, making it impossible for him to leave fingerprints. Michael presented testimony about his timeline to defend himself. He claimed he had met Crystal at a bar and they had returned to her place to have consensual sex. However, his story became suspicious when he described a strange man wearing a black motorcycle jacket breaking into the house, knocking him unconscious, and killing Crystal. When Michael regained consciousness, he allegedly tried to fight off the attacker but had injured his hand. The attacker then fled, and Michael also left the crime scene without a reasonable explanation. Michael's story was very unconvincing. The investigation revealed that the only shoe prints at the scene had belonged to Michael. If his story was true, the intruder would have had to take off his shoes before entering the house, which still wouldn't have explained the lack of other marks on the floor. Furthermore, no witnesses had come forward to confirm that Crystal had been at the bar with Michael. The trial ended on April 9, 2007, with Michael being unanimously found guilty. As a result, he received a life sentence without the possibility of parole and remained incarcerated. Sarah's life was deeply affected by her mother's death, but she found the strength to move forward with time. She pursued further education, became a writer, and wrote a book about her mother's murder. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Lisa Valdez. Lisa Valdez was born on September 6, 1961, in San Francisco, California. She grew up with her mother and brother. Lisa and her mother had an exceptionally close relationship, rarely arguing. As a teenager, Lisa developed a passion for dance and an interest in modern technology. She was an early adopter of emerging technologies, including email, which was still a novelty at the time. This interest in technology would later shape her career path. After graduating from college, Lisa found a job as a software analyst in San Francisco. Her mother then used her savings to buy Lisa an apartment in a desirable neighborhood. Lisa lived alone in the apartment, progressing her career and spending time with her family whenever possible. She also continued to pursue her passion for dance. On May 16, 1998, Lisa, then 36, hosted her mother and some family friends at her apartment for the evening. After the guests departed, her mother helped with the dishes before heading home. Before leaving, Lisa promised to call her mother the next day, but the call never came. Initially, her mother assumed Lisa was simply busy. Since Lisa had dance practice scheduled for the next day, her mother decided to wait. However, the entire day passed without any word from Lisa. After trying unsuccessfully to contact Lisa for several days, Lisa's mother began to worry. When Lisa did not show up for work on Monday, her co-workers called her mother to express their concern. The mother immediately decided to go to Lisa's apartment complex. When Lisa's mother arrived at her home, she saw a group of police officers. Lisa's mother approached the police to ask what was going on and was told that residents had reported a strange smell coming from one of the apartments. The apartment manager investigated, found the door unlocked, and called the police after discovering a body on the floor. Police quickly identified the victim as Lisa. Her body showed signs of trauma, making it clear she had been murdered. The advanced state of decomposition suggested that Lisa had been dead for several days. The police suspected that Lisa had been assaulted due to the presence of her underwear next to her body. The crime scene was marked by extensive blood stains on the floor and bed, with the TV and air conditioner still on. However, the disarray of the apartment was later found to be consistent with Lisa's usual living habits. There was no indication of a robbery, as all of Lisa's valuables, including jewelry, were left untouched. The only missing items were her keys and a gym bag. A peculiar detail was the discovery that the attacker had cut off some of Lisa's hair and taken it with them. Detectives believed that the killer may have known Lisa personally. This theory was supported by the lack of forced entry into the apartment complex, which was secured by a fence and required a key or resident approval for access. Police investigating Lisa's murder began by interviewing her neighbors. Their first lead came when a neighbor mentioned discovering a bent metal door frame and faint blood stains on her door 2 days before Lisa's body was discovered. The neighbor had previously reported the incident to the building's management, but they had not notified the police. Police are certain that Lisa's murder was linked to a break-in at her neighbor's apartment. It is possible that the person trying to break into her neighbor's apartment was seen by Lisa and killed her, but another theory is that the break-in may have occurred after Lisa was murdered. Police also interviewed the person who cleaned Lisa's apartment weekly. She said that 2 days before Lisa's body was found, she tried to open the apartment door with her key but found it locked from the inside. When she looked through the door, she saw a naked woman lying on the floor and a male voice talking. Assuming it was a private situation, the cleaner quickly left without doing anything. Police suspected Lisa was dead when the cleaner heard a man's voice. And it was her killer, who was still in the apartment. The cleaner also reported seeing a black Ziploc bag near the body. An envelope containing cash was found taped to the inside of Lisa's apartment door. The money was for the cleaner, as Lisa always left it with her the day before cleaning. The presence of the envelope suggests that Lisa was likely attacked after her mother left, sometime between midnight and early morning. Neighbors who lived downstairs reported hearing a loud noise coming from upstairs on the night of the attack, followed by someone coming down the stairs. Although they did not see who it was, the neighbors' accounts provided a timeline of events. Police continued to search Lisa's apartment for clues while medical professionals examined her body. Forensic analysis revealed that a fingerprint on the toilet seat did not belong to Lisa. In an attempt to identify the fingerprint, the police collected fingerprints from all of Lisa's friends and family members, but none of them matched the mystery fingerprint. Detectives therefore suspected that the mystery fingerprint might belong to Lisa's killer. Medical examiners released their report, shedding new light on the case. Lisa's body showed more than 20 stab wounds, but the advanced decomposition made it difficult to determine if she had been sexually assaulted. The medical team also discovered skin particles under Lisa's nails, which were likely to have come from her attacker, and sent them to the lab for analysis. One of the pillowcases showed multiple blood stains, which upon analysis were found to be a mixture of Lisa's blood and another person's. The police sent the blood stains to the laboratory for further testing. Police believe the killer may have accidentally injured himself when stabbing Lisa. At the scene, they discovered 2 bandages from a first aid kit in the toilet, which the killer may have used to bandage his wound. Additionally, the killer may have left fingerprints on the toilet seat when discarding the bandages. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the pillowcase belonged to a man whose DNA was not in the FBI database. Furthermore, the skin particles found under Lisa's fingernails and the blood on her knee were from the same person. Although the DNA did not match anyone in the database, detectives now had a DNA profile of the killer. The police compared the DNA evidence with samples from criminals in the area. They also began to scrutinize Lisa's acquaintances. Lisa's mother mentioned that Lisa had met a man named Albert Ketto, and that they had planned to go on a date the day after the murder. However, Albert Ketto had canceled their plans just days before. Police brought Albert Ketto in for questioning and noticed a large cut on his hand. Police considered Albert Ketto a potential suspect. However, Albert Ketto denied any involvement in the crime. Police collected Albert Ketto's fingerprints and DNA samples for further analysis. However, the test results showed that none of Albert Ketto's samples matched the blood found on the pillowcase. Additionally, the skin particles under Lisa's fingernails belonged to someone else. This new information led investigators to expand their search for other suspects. Police decided to look at messages left on Lisa's answering machine in the days before she was killed. Police compiled a list of 40 callers but discovered one unusual message. It came from a man who had called Lisa just hours before the murder. He left a message saying, "You know how it goes. Hey Lisa, are you home?" When police played the message to Lisa's friend, the friend recognized the voice as Albert Robinson, a co-worker of Lisa's. Lisa and Albert Robinson worked together. However, Albert Robinson had expressed romantic feelings for Lisa, but she did not return his feelings. Albert Robinson appeared at Lisa's memorial service a few days after the murder. Albert Robinson claimed that he and Lisa were in love, saying that they planned to get married and start a family. However, Lisa's friends and mother objected to this. Lisa told them that she had no feelings for Albert Robinson and that the relationship between the two was just friends. During questioning, Albert Robinson denied any involvement in Lisa's murder, claiming that he loved Lisa and would never hurt her. However, he refused to provide DNA and fingerprint samples to the police, which aroused suspicion and made him the prime suspect. Police obtained a search warrant for Albert Robinson's home, where they discovered something unusual. Albert Robinson's home contained many photos of Lisa. However, despite the evidence, he continued to deny his involvement. He cooperated by providing his fingerprints and DNA samples to the police. However, they were surprised when Albert Robinson's test results did not match the samples collected at Lisa's apartment. Police eliminated Albert Robinson as a suspect. Due to lack of evidence, the case remained unsolved for many years. The investigation continues, with police waiting for the suspect's DNA or fingerprints to be matched in a database. Over the years, Lisa's mother has used social media platforms to plead for information. But the police have yet to uncover any new clues, leaving the case even more unsolved. In 2010, the FBI used new DNA technology to identify suspects by matching their DNA to relatives in a database. This method was limited to close relatives. On September 2nd, police received a call from the FBI with the news. Although the FBI did not compare the DNA to possible relatives in the database, they did retest the original DNA sample as part of the process. Amazingly, 13 years after the murder, the retested DNA sample was a perfect match. DNA from blood and skin particles found under Lisa's fingernails matched a 52-year-old man named Anthony Hughes, whose DNA had recently been added to the FBI database. Although Anthony had a lengthy criminal record, his DNA was not in the database because he had committed a minor crime. However, a change in California law requires DNA samples from all convicted felons, regardless of the severity of their crimes. As a result, Anthony's DNA was collected after he was arrested for petty theft. The investigation revealed that Anthony's fingerprints were also on file and matched those found on the toilet seat in Lisa's apartment. Experts were able to identify the specific finger that left the fingerprint. Prior to the arrest, police searched for additional evidence that linked Anthony to the crime. 13 years ago, police reviewed calls to Lisa's phone before she was killed, but they ignored calls made after her death. Recently, police discovered a call made by Anthony to Lisa's phone just one day after her death. He left a message, the content of which seemed normal and did not arouse any suspicion at the time. If the police had investigated Anthony at that time, they would have found his extensive criminal record. When they went through Lisa's belongings, detectives found Anthony's phone number in her address book, indicating that she knew him. After talking to Lisa's friends, the police learned that Lisa had dated Anthony in high school. The police now had all the information they needed to question Anthony. Since Anthony was homeless at the time and had no fixed address, the police approached cautiously to avoid Anthony fleeing. They arrested him under the pretext of investigating a series of robberies in San Francisco, and he surrendered without resistance. Police began asking about a series of robberies, gradually bringing up Anthony's previous convictions. Eventually, police asked him if he knew a woman named Lisa Valdez. He initially denied knowing her, but when shown a photo, he admitted that they had been high school acquaintances. Anthony also claimed that he had not seen Lisa since the late 1980s. The police pressed Anthony for information about his relationship with Lisa. Eventually, the police produced evidence of his DNA found in Lisa's apartment in 1998. Upon hearing this, Anthony burst into tears. Anthony was restrained as he cried and screamed. He was eventually charged with murder, and detectives informed Lisa's family that her killer had been arrested. However, the trial did not begin until 4 years later. During the trial, Anthony initially appeared confident, but as the trial progressed, his pace changed. He began appearing in court with a Bible and wearing a cross. Anthony's lawyer argued that his client was incapable of committing the murder due to a medical condition that weakened his muscles, making movement extremely difficult. Despite the defense's argument, the prosecution presented strong evidence linking Anthony to the crime scene. This included his skin cells found under the Lisa's fingernails, his blood on a pillowcase, and his fingerprint on the toilet seat. Anthony maintained his innocence, claiming he had not seen the Lisa since the late 1980s. The prosecution, on the other hand, proposed a different scenario. They believed Anthony had contacted the Lisa, visited her home, and attempted to engage in intimate relations with her. When she refused, he became enraged and killed her. As part of the crime, he cut off a portion of her hair and took it with him before fleeing the scene. Ultimately, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict, finding Anthony guilty of first-degree murder. However, the prosecution faced challenges in securing a conviction for sexual assault due to the advanced state of the Lisa's decomposition, which made it difficult to gather sufficient evidence. The charges were reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree murder, which carries a lighter sentence. Anthony was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Anthony has been in prison since then and continues to maintain his innocence. Anthony will be eligible for parole in 2031 at age 72. However, Anthony's chances of being paroled are slim, as parole boards typically view refusal to plead guilty as a lack of remorse.